the morning to you, and welcome to the future, otherwise known as episode 28, Tomorrow's World, Audit Time. Top of the morning to you, Mark.
Top of the evening to you, Russ.
How are you on this very special, most Irish of days?
Gosh, I feel very special, Russ.
Yeah.
I feel touched by the Blarney Stone itself, I suppose. Well, one hopes. We are doing a podcast. Sure, if my blood doesn't run green, Russ.
Well, I must say, I'm impressed, both impressed and delighted that you've turned up to this podcast recording in your full leprechaun outfit.
Oh yeah,
Mark.
yeah, absolutely.
It's a beautiful green suit that you're wearing there, and I can't believe you've actually dyed your beard ginger, all especially for it.
Well, especially for you, Russ. And the thing is, like, it's an actual leprechaun suit, so I mean, it is designed for a 2-foot person, so it is at best uncomfortable.
And you managed to wear both one of those really tall Guinness hats, and then on top of that, another hat that says "Kiss me, I'm Irish."
I know.
It's a beautiful balancing act.
Thank you very much. I have to keep my head straight, like one of those girls trying to, learn posture.
Sorry, Mark. This is probably hugely racist. I apologise.
Shocking.
But today, when I'm releasing this, will be St. Patrick's Day. Do you have anything planned for it, Mark? You going to go out and...
I am. I'm going out for dinner, but it is pure coincidence that it's St. Patrick's Day.
Oh.
But I'm looking forward to it. It's just one of those things where we just both happen to be free in the same day and Irish, but I don't think we're going to make any fuss or nonsense about it.
No.
I don't think I've been out for St. Patrick's Day things for a long time. It's a bit like I never liked New Year's all that much. But you put up with it because your friends do, and you end up having a good time. And I suppose maybe I never really liked St. Patrick's Day either, but your friends like it, so you put up with it. And then at some point, people just slightly stopped going out. I don't know what it's like in Amsterdam, but and I'm like, I'm not too... Then again, it's on a Friday this year, so there actually might be... Some people are interested to hit the pub. Oh, because you remember, like you'd go out and you would drink enough Guinness to win the Guinness hats. That's how you got those.
I was thinking about that, but I was wondering, was that just because our regular pub that we went to in Tunbridge Wells was an Irish pub?
Gosh, I don't know.
Cassidy's.
No,
is Cassidy's still there?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. No, because that's where you and I have also been to Yates's wine lodges, and they've had them there. I mean, they probably do it O'Neill's as well, I suppose. Yeah, well, maybe it was an Irish bar thing, but there was definitely kind of one of those Costa Coffee kind of, the 10th trip you get a Guinness hat.
Yeah, there are quite a lot of Irish bars in Amsterdam, actually. I realised the other day, one thing I've never tried, because I was reading the Pop Bitch email, and they were talking about Saoirse Ronan was drinking a pint of Guinness with a shot of Tia Maria in it.
Yes.
And that's one of those things that I've always heard about, and I always thought, I bet that's really nice. And I've never actually got round to having it. So that's what I might do this Saturday. I might go down to one of the Irish pubs in the centre of town and order a Guinness with a Tia Maria in it.
Yeah, I'm sure they won't be busy.
But yes, so St. Patrick's Day, I went through the Radio Times and tried to find something Irish that connected, some sort of Irish connection with Tomorrow's World, and discovered that there was indeed at least one episode of Tomorrow's World that was broadcast from Ireland itself, Mark. So that's the one we're doing today. It's the 25th of November, 1976. I think it's kind of a slightly special episode. It's called Tomorrow's World in Europe. And Raymondo, he is the presenter this time, he is presenting from County Meath.
The Grange Research Station,
there we go.
Meath.
Yes, the Grange Research Station, County Meath, Ireland. And we've even got, not wanting to spoil it, but we've even got ourselves an Irish presenter later on in the programme as well. So, I think this could well be the most Irish episode of Tomorrow's World in existence, Mark.
I will be honest, I suppose I was slightly dreading what you might find. I was genuinely pleasantly surprised at how kind of respectful the programme is of its location. Not once do they kind of fall into kind of any hackneyed, lazy stereotypes. It's all pretty responsible, actually, and they seem like they're having a lovely time.
I feel like we've noticed that there's a real positivity about Europe in a lot of these 70s episodes. I guess maybe because it's quite close to after we joined it, so there's still a real sort of sense of optimism about the whole. There's
still on that initial high.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of this is sort of looking at our European neighbours seeing what they're up to in the world. And it's all basically farming based stuff, isn't it?
I was about to say, we should say that it's as much as it's a European special, it's basically a farming special.
Yes, yeah,
which is
yeah,
why
yeah.
they're in Ireland, because obviously it's famously a farming country.
Yeah.
And we dot round Europe and we learn things and we learn better practice from our continental chums. Yeah, as you say, it's really positive. And I suppose, to be fair, when the UK joined the EEC, like obviously it's the European Economic Community, but at that point, like services, banking and stuff like that, I don't think was open and free in the way that it became before we left. So really, I would imagine the driving, if memory serves me correctly, like the driving force behind the EEC was kind of mining, resources and farming. And so that's why this has this kind of focus on agriculture and animal husbandry.
Yes, yeah.
More than like a European special would, like in the 90s or 2000s, when, I mean, you could have talked about anything from, space through to, what's the opposite of space? Tiny
Underwater?
things, tiny places. Yeah, underwater, Russ, thank you, yeah. Well, which obviously, we did, only a few episodes ago, we did learn that the French don't care about invasive weeds in the Mediterranean.
That's true.
Yeah.
And obviously, when I saw that it was an agriculture special, I did wonder, although, is Mark going to turn his nose up at this? What with your towny
hatred of countryside?
Yes, your towny fear of nature and all things countryside. But I think you agree that actually it's not a bad episode at all, is it?
No, it's a really lovely episode. Yeah. I don't want to go visit any of these places, but I certainly appreciate what they're making for us.
And I must say, from doing the research, something that it sort of made me realise is that agriculture is a far more scientific and technical enterprise than perhaps its image suggests. A lot of this stuff that I was getting into was just as complex and detailed as any other of the science things that I've looked into for any of the other episodes. It's just that obviously the front men of agriculture are these sort of ruddy-faced, tweed-wearing psychopaths. So we don't and it's a whole world that the man in the street doesn't really get to see very much. So you don't really realise, but actually, looking into it, it's actually quite a sort of rich and varied and interesting subject matter.
All the more reason to kind of, along our travels through all these episodes, I really would like to find that spot in the calendar, the Tomorrow's World calendar, where farming and agriculture just drops off the agenda. I have no doubt that it is as dynamic now as it was then and as cutting edge now as it was then in terms of kind of advancing knowledge of X, Y, and Z. But at some point it just wasn't interesting to broadcasters. Or perhaps just the audience's kind of values changed. I suppose, like, obviously one of our TW tropes is cruel farmers. And it's difficult not to have a bit of a spoiler alert here, but we're going to tick that box. and the weird thing about it is, like, they're not obviously cruel, but just the subtext to a lot of what is being discussed and described has clearly a very solid foundation of absolute cruelty to animals. So, let that be a warning. And maybe just people were no longer happy understanding farming in that context. So maybe it just became easier not to talk about.
There is one moment in this episode where a pig looks directly into the camera, and it really does look like it really does look like a cry for help.
It does really look like, and unfortunately, there's nothing we can do for that pig. But 47 years later.
But before we get into that, Mark, I thought maybe we can become Britain's premier podcast about saints. So I'm going to...
That's true. Go on then.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of information.
At least there's only one St. Patrick, though, right?
Yeah, well, there is a theory that there was two.
Whatever.
There's a theory that there might be two St. Patricks, but I won't even...
Just out of interest, from a grammatical sense, would that be St. Patrick's, or is that Saint Patrick?
I would go with Saint Patrick, I think.
I think that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, so St. Patrick, obviously, as with Valentine last month, I would take all this with a pinch of salt. Although, I would take it with less of a pinch of salt this time, because apparently he did actually write two texts that still exist in Latin. Obviously, could have been written by anybody, but they are autobiographical in nature, so it's assumed that he wrote them himself. But it was from the 5th century. The reason 17th of March is his day is because that's the day he apparently died. They reckon he's either English or Scottish. But the whole reason why he went to Ireland originally was because he was kidnapped by pirates, Mark. He was kidnapped by pirates at the age of 16. Irish pirates. They grabbed him, turned him into a slave, and kept him in Ireland for 6 years. And for some reason, being kept as a slave by pirates encouraged him to become a Christian. I guess maybe he thought maybe if I believe in God a bit more, he'll help me escape. which
Well,
worked.
surely you should believe in the Irish pirates god. And then they might-
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Yeah.
that might help you a bit more.
Turns out he did help him because he did manage to escape. He legged it back to Britain. But once he got back to Britain, he had a vision. And in this vision, some Old Testament person or something like that handed him a letter. It sounded like he's been hired. Handed him a letter, and the letter said, "You must become the voice of the Irish." Okay?
Jerry Wogan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he went, right. Okay, I better get on this missionary train then. So he popped over to France, studied to become a priest, got ordained, and then legged it back to Ireland and became a missionary. Because at the time, the Irish were a bunch of pagan heathens. So he got over there and obviously, clearly, did a pretty good job, because I would say that of all the countries, Ireland is pretty solidly Catholic. So he must have been a pretty decent missionary.
Top-notch missionary,
yeah. Although, weirdly, a lot of the locals didn't really like him very much, apparently, and didn't trust him. And they kept accusing him of various impropriety with money. And
You mean the money was just resting in his account?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And they reckon that the reason he wrote these autobiographies about himself was to try and clear his name. And
Needless to say, he had the last time. Oh, no, that's Alan Partridge, isn't it? No,
no smoke without fire there, isn't it? It's a bit weird that those rumours have still lasted the past 1,500 years or so.
Wow,
so
that's something.
I would say the two most famous things that Patrick's known for are one, the old shamrock thing. He suggested that the shamrock represented the Holy Trinity because it's a three-leafed plant, and then the whole thing about banishing snakes from the island as well is the other big one. Firstly, shamrock. Mark, this amazed me. Did you know that there is no specific plant called a shamrock?
I think I did know that.
If you ask a botanist what's a shamrock, they'll go, there's no such thing. It is just a three-leafed plant. So, typically, when you see one drawn, they draw it as a clover. That doesn't necessarily have to be what a shamrock is. The second thing that he's famous for doing, of course, is banishing the snakes. There's a bloke in one of the museums in Dublin who has made it his life's work to study the fossil record of Ireland, and he's worked out that Ireland has never had any snakes in it in the first place.
That's how good he was, Russ. That's how good St. Patrick was.
He banished the fossils as well.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that this bloke is like not just gone, well, that's clearly the explanation.
He's a great time at a party, doesn't he?
He's actually needed to check just to make sure that it's not true.
Well, look, all I know is that when I was growing up in Ireland, Russ, I never saw a snake. That's all the evidence I need.
I didn't realise this as well. St. Patrick's Day, obviously it's bang in the middle of Lent, but it has special dispensation for you can eat and drink on St. Patrick's Day. So presumably that's one of the reasons why it's become really popular, because basically you could just cheat Lent. So you can get as slaughtered and eat as much food as you like right in the middle of the fasting. It is the most celebrated national festival around the world. More countries celebrate it than any other national festival. I don't know what other national festivals are there though, really.
Independence Day, Canadian Thanksgiving off the top of my head. Oh, Bastille Day.
Bastille Day, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
The association of the colour green is linked to another snake myth, Mark. These snake myths seem to contradict each other. Apparently, Goidel the Green, who is in a book from the 11th century called the Book of the Taking of Ireland. Goidel the Green is apparently the original ancestor of the Gaelic people, and he was the inventor of the Gaelic languages. And he was bitten by a venomous snake. But luckily Moses turned up.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah, and put his staff on the snake bite and cured the snake bites, but left a green mark on it. And then Goidel the Green's descendants all settled in Ireland, which is it gives the association of green with Ireland, and also why Ireland doesn't have any snakes. So there's two Irish myths about why the place hasn't got any snakes. I don't know why Irish people are so obsessed with the idea. Does it secretly play on their mind that they haven't got any snakes? So surely there's loads of places that haven't got any snakes. Has Iceland got any snakes?
Loads of them, Russ. you can't walk for tripping over a snake. I suppose it's just because, don't forget that obviously, yes, snakes aren't great creatures in terms of they're not cuddly pets, you can't domesticate them. But also, in the Bible, they are the devil. So,
good point.
They were frowned upon in general.
That's a good point, yeah. Oh, yeah, so maybe actually it's kind of boasting, isn't it?
No, it's definitely boasting. Yeah. Ireland's a devil-free country. Which is not quite true.
Well, Christa Berg lives there, doesn't he?
He does, Russ, yes. With his famous fetish for red.
Shortest St. Patrick's Day parade of all time, Mark, took place in Dripsey, County Cork. Do you know how far they travelled in the shortest St. Patrick's Day parade?
From one pub to the neighbouring pub?
Yes! Yeah. It was 23.5 metres. kilometres between the village's two pubs. The event began in 1999, but ceased after 5 years because one of the pubs closed down.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
They've also celebrated it on the International Space Station. Some Irish-American astronaut, Catherine Coleman, she played a flute and a tin whistle.
Did she try and dye space green? Americans love dyeing things green, don't they?
Well, I was just about to come to that, Mark. I was going to say, that's a weird one, isn't it? That I always imagine that seems really bad. Apparently, it's just vegetable dye, but I just don't like the idea of dyeing a whole river green. So a lot of American cities do it. The original city to do it was Chicago. It first happened in 1962. Local sewage workers had been using green dye to check for sewage leaks. And then apparently they had the idea of dyeing the river green for St. Patrick's Day. Is that what happened, Mark? Or did they dump a load of sewage in the river and then think, how are we going to cover this up? It's St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Let's just claim we've dyed the river green for...
You raise a very convincing argument there, Russ.
The Americans are the most sort of ferocious St. Patrick's Day celebrators these days. But apparently 61% of Americans are going to celebrate St. Patrick's Day this year, and they're going to spend around $6.9 billion on it. I don't know what proportion of that is booze.
All of it? I mean, what do you know eat?
It's either booze or novelty hats, isn't it, Mark? I mean,
yeah.
What else could it be? Yeah, that's St. Patrick's Day. Should we join Raymondo in Ireland?
Yeah, let's celebrate St. Patrick's Day the way it was meant, Russ.
Welcome to a rather damp and chilly but still beautiful Ireland. Tonight we're looking at some of the ways in which agriculture is moving in Europe, so what better way to start than with a taste of things to come.
Well, Mark, it's a special episode.
Very special episode, Russell. Which means very special opening credits, Russell. And what very special ones they are too. Would you like me to discuss them, Russell? Well, not discuss them. Would you like me to explain them to you?
Oh,
even though
please.
You've seen them multiple times. So most of this happens over the footage of a lovely little blue tractor driving through some kind of tree-lined country roads and then into the kind of the stable courtyard area of the research station in County Meath. Same classic theme tune, obviously, by the way. No one's going to muck around with that for at least another few years. And superimposed that we have, initially we have Tomorrow's World, the famous 1970s logo, but that rotates like it's a speedy rotisserie chicken, rotates between Tomorrow's World and Tomorrow's Europe. And on that European bent, Russ, we then see, was it De Wereld van Morgen, which is Dutch, which I looked up and seems to translate as Blackbird's Morning.
Because
I misspelled it.
You misspelled it as Mereld. Mereld isn't a word, but Merel is blackbird. But it actually says Wereld, Vereld, which is world.
Oh, so it is the world of tomorrow.
Morgen is tomorrow.
Well, because that was rotating as well, so I couldn't quite. I suppose so I missed it, and also it's all Dutch to me. We then flick into Die Welt van Morgen, which is two globes of text, Russ, that kind of rotate around each other, making sure that you can't read it at all. And it only stops for maybe a quarter of a second, and that is in German, that is the world of tomorrow, and that is in the classic German font.
That's full blown Mein Kampf, that is, isn't it? That is absolutely...
It is kind of creepy.
There should be some sort of eagle or insignia stamped
on
it.
It was crying out for an eagle, wasn't it? Yeah, absolutely. After Die Welt van Morgen, we have Il Mondo di Domani, which is, we zoom out of those words, which appear like some kind of repeated kind of oscilloscope reading, the kind of the way they go up and down. And that also means the world of tomorrow, but obviously that's in Italian. We have Le Monde de Demain, which are words that appear and disappear like they're on four rollers, like pages of a newspaper going through the printing press, and obviously that's French for the world of tomorrow. I'm assuming it is the world. They're all called the world of tomorrow. We're the only ones who call it tomorrow's world. Just the way that English does tend to be structured slightly differently.
But I was just thinking about this. Does this mean English is the only language with the flexibility for tomorrow to be able to possess something in this way?
It does feel that way, doesn't it? Yeah. Then we have your friends, the Danish. They're very close to them, and that is the words vermittelenswerden, which shrinks and expands in what I kind of liken to a kind of a Eurotrash style. It actually looked like the Eurotrash, you know, the way the words would kind of get big and get small. That means the world of the future, which I thought was interesting. And then at the end of it all, Raymond has been the one driving the tractor, and he jumps off the little tractor. And we see that the actual show that we're watching tonight, tonight's episode, itself has a title, which I think is the first time we've seen this.
Yeah,
almost
think
like
so.
it's been scripted like a drama. The title of this week's episode is Down on the Farm.
Yes, which is almost
Which is very
impossible not to
fitting.
say to yourself in a stereotypical farming voice, isn't it? Down on the farm.
Down on the farm. All right there, Raymondo.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you're not wrong. Very special credits for a very special program.
Absolutely.
Very cheap, but, you know, just get to the theme of the episode, which is Europe.
And also tells us exactly where Raymond is as well. I don't think he's ever been told. We've ever been given the address of the location that he's sitting in before. I did look into.
No, he's never been doxed by the show before.
No. I did look into this. The Grange Research Station is still there. It's although it's now called the Grange Animal and Grassland Research Centre. It's part of a thing called TGASC, which is the Agricultural and Food Development Authority, and there's a college just up the road. So, and this research station specialises in beef, which presumably is why we see
Quite a lot of cow.
quite a lot of cow content in this episode, isn't it?
Content, yeah. A lot of cow tent.
And also, just a little word on that tractor that Raymond's driving there. That is, of course, the Ford 3600 tractor.
Yeah.
Which they discontinued in 1981, but you can still buy them even now.
Yeah.
A well-used second-hand example on Auto Trader still cost you your best part of $3,000.
Jeez.
And one thing I did notice as well, interestingly, is they don't, obviously, you know, when you buy a second-hand car, it normally got the mileage on it.
Yeah.
Tractors, they don't do it by mileage, they do it by hours of use. So you'll have a tractor and it'll say, this is your tractor's been used for 11,000 hours, which I guess makes more sense, really, isn't it? Because the tractor's not going to be necessarily driving around the place much.
No.
I'm quite interested by Raymond's outfit here. If you saw him from the top half, you would never know in a million years he was wearing a suit, would you?
No, you wouldn't.
But,
No.
but he clearly is from the bottom half wearing. It's kind of like his top half is kind of like, I would imagine, the sort of outfit you'd wear if you were driving a open top vintage car on a cold day.
Yes.
And I imagine that probably is the outfit that Raymond does wear. When he's
That's
driving
exactly
around
correct.
vintage
Yeah,
car on a cold day.
You're describing Raymond Baxter here.
Yeah. I have to say, the more I looked at his jacket, the more I wanted it, actually. I think it's quite a nice jacket he's got there.
It's what kind of a mustard yellow? You got some nice jackets, Russ. I don't think you need to be buying it. Well, you don't buy them, but I don't think you definitely don't need to be buying anymore.
Just to clarify, Mark, I'm not a shoplifter. I just.
Oh no, that's not. You know what I meant. I suppose maybe the listeners didn't. Yeah.
Well, okay. Shall we swiftly move on to the first segment in much the way that Raymond very swiftly moves on to it, doesn't he?
No hanging around.
The Dordogne in western France, a land of caves, chasms, and tree-lined slopes beloved of tourists. Here the oak rules. They're everywhere. Sturdy, tough, thriving on the limestone soil. But these are no ordinary trees. They conceal a treasure sought by the French with what amounts to passion. Truffle hunting. The pig is specially trained and an expert. With truffles, you need a nose for the job. The truffle is a fungus that ripens just below the surface. It has strange powers. Where it grows, it burns off surface vegetation by antibiotic action. Truffle-bearing oaks stand in an empty fairy ring of their own. French farmers have harvested truffles for centuries, but the ancient skill has become neglected. Now science is coming to the rescue. These men are government botanists. Every oak they plant here will guarantee truffles in abundance. Truffles attach themselves to the roots at random. One tree might produce just one truffle, but these roots are different. They've already been inoculated with truffle spores. The truffle-bearing roots grow fat and rounded. On their skin, a material called mycorrhiza that is part fungus, part tree. It's blending the mycorrhiza in the laboratory that's allowed French scientists to produce truffles to order. The tiny oaks with their secret formula roots will take 6 years to yield truffles. Now, French farmers produce 100 tons a year. their new inoculation method means that they can increase that figure 20-fold. More truffles and easier to find. And with truffles selling at £125 a kilo, that's big business. But why all the fuss? The truffle's flavour defies adjectives. Its spirit is rich, yet subtle. Captured here in Omelette aux truffes Périgueux.
I was just thinking, Mark, right? You know the film The Goonies?
Yes, of course.
The big lad, he does what he's called the truffle shuffle.
The truffle shuffle, yeah.
Why is that called the truffle? His name's not Truffle. So why is that called the truffle shuffle?
I don't know. I've never thought about it, actually. Good question.
Because, I mean, I doubt children in that town in America would ever
Had black truffle?
have truffle in any sense. They wouldn't even have chocolate truffles, would they?
No. You're absolutely right.
They wouldn't encounter in any kind of truffle. So why?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I've never thought about it. But now that you have asked that, I'd like to know the answer.
Anyway, you like a bit of truffle in your dinner, Mark?
I
You
do.
seem like the
Yes.
sort of highfalutin type that probably grate on your everything, don't you?
Well, I mean, in our relationship, JC is definitely the truffle aficionado.
Yeah.
I don't like mushroom all that much, but truffle is a really lovely special thing to add. You know, I do like a nice kind of a shaving of truffle. JC has truffle salt, which is delicious and is a nice thing to sprinkle on fries even. And I mean,
salt is
you know,
delicious in all its ways, isn't it? I love a bit
Absolutely,
of salt.
but there is something about that truffle salt that like really just kind of, it's like an extra punch to the back of the throat, which is really nice. Yeah, I mean, a bit of truffle oil. Who can say no to a bit of truffle oil? It's delicious. It is really nice. But I mean, if it vanished tomorrow, I don't think I'd cry into my spilt omelette. Well, what about you? Actually, what do you think of truffle? Black truffle?
I enjoy the flavour. I do think there's a tendency these days, A, for it to be put in too many things, and B,
Yes.
for too much of it be put in things.
Yes.
Because it is an
Which we can talk about in a minute.
it's an extraordinarily powerful flavour.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And so I think should be used sparingly. Otherwise, it's
Subtly, yeah.
Yes, much like you shouldn't slap too much aftershave on. You know, it's that sort of similar thing. It's a little wisp of it, very pleasant, but but not too much. What a great job that would be if you a person like me who enjoys the countryside. Lovely job that would be, wouldn't it? Just truffle hunting, just milling about with your pet pig or your pet dog, whichever you decide to.
As long as you didn't need the money to kind of like make sure your family didn't kind of end up starving, then yeah, I'd say it'd probably be you'd enjoy it, wouldn't you? Your little Russell and his little pet pig.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, these some very rustic French people here, aren't there?
Oh, they're reassuringly grubby.
And obviously, Willy Woolley's giving us the voiceover. This is one of, I think, 3 segments where we get a full Willy Woolley voiceover, but don't see him at all.
No,
we don't see him
not...
at all this episode. We hear him a lot. I was thinking maybe they just bunged him a free holiday to France anyway, just because
that's how he gets paid.
Exactly. Yeah, we got the sense that he's very used to France, isn't he?
Whether he is or he isn't, he wants the listener at home, the viewer at home, to be left under no illusion that Willy Woolley is definitely familiar with France, and he eats black truffle all the time. The Dodone.
Which
sorry, where Willy Woolley?
Which sounds like something. It sounds like a spring going off, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
The innovation here is the idea that rather than truffle hunting being a sort of almost luck-based
potluck really
activity, these people have worked out a way of ensuring that the trees that they plant are pretty much guaranteed to have truffles underneath them after, I think, 6 years, they said, of growing.
Yeah, that's right.
Obviously, truffles being these rare and highly prized items, turning it into sort of an industry where they're absolutely guaranteed. You think, well, that would be a massive money spinner. But then you think, well, hang on a minute, is there a bad side to this? Because does this mean that you suddenly get an abundance of something that was formerly rare? Won't that drive the prices down?
I had the same thought myself, actually, that idea of, like, be careful what you wish for. The other thing is, like, when we see what the scientists are working on under the microscope, it does make it feel like they are deliberately creating diseased trees. I have to say, I didn't know where black truffles came from, so I did not know it came from the roots, or like it would grow from the roots of an oak tree. That was new to me. And it makes you wonder, like, well, why aren't they all over Britain? But it did feel like this is not the natural state of the great oak tree to have basically little cancerous growths just leaching off them, which is how it kind of comes across. So, but yeah, like but then based on the fact that truffle is still expensive, it doesn't feel like they've actually been able to guarantee as many truffles as Willy Woolly implies.
Is it because there's more demand for truffle now, though? Demand could have gone up at the same rate that production has gone up.
Yeah. When was the first time you had a truffle? It was not 1984, was it?
No. I don't think I ever encountered truffle before this century.
Oh yeah, no, easily, definitely, and even then, probably in the last 10 years. Maybe.
Yeah.
It's still a very special thing. To the best of my knowledge, you cannot go into Tesco's and buy truffle. I'm not even sure you could buy truffle-infused ingredients.
You could probably buy truffle oil, I reckon. I reckon you could get truffle oil.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You might be able to get truffle oil, but like that would be it. Which is no bad thing. I mean, truffle oil is very useful. It still feels like a pretty rare thing. But then maybe you're right. But I come across it much more than I used to. But that probably reflects that we don't just eat in Wetherspoons anymore, Russ. we do in other places.
A pity, Mark.
To be fair, that's feels sadder for you. You don't even have the option to eat them at the spoons where you live. Whereas I turn my nose up at them on a reg.
My sister texted me last night. She goes, "Yeah, did you know that every Wetherspoons has a unique carpet?" I went,
no, I did not know that, of course.
God, do I know that? That's like basic Wetherspoons knowledge. Did
you send her a picture of that book you have?
I mean, I've got a book of spoons carpets, and it turned out she was watching a Channel 5 documentary. I think it's called like The Secrets of Wetherspoons.
Secrets of Wetherspoons. Yeah. I saw it on the EPG.
Yeah. I thought, I'll have to see if I can track that down.
Snaffle that one. Yeah,
give that a watch. Although I'll be very surprised if there's any secrets that Wetherspoons have that I'm not already privy to, Mark.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, truffles. First known to be eaten by the ancient Sumerians, Mark. You don't hear much about the ancient Sumerians these days, do you? And that was around 2000 BC.
Actually, to be fair, Russ, you don't hear a lot about modern Sumerians. They're always ancient.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were tucking into the truffles in 2000 BC, and the Romans liked a bit of it as well. And they had an interesting theory, the Romans, because they didn't really have a concept of, what fungus was or anything like that, or how it worked anyway. So their theory was that truffles were formed by lightning hitting oak trees. They thought it was some sort of byproduct of the lightning bolt hitting the oak tree, and it caused these things to grow on the roots.
Oh, okay.
Which kind of makes sense, really. I could sort of see...
Well, especially when Willy talks about how like there's a little fairy ring of kind of barren land around the truffle.
Yeah. But obviously that's absolute nonsense. They're completely wrong. Then they kind of fell out. Idiots. They kind of fell out of favour. Nobody really ate them very much until the Renaissance came along, and obviously everybody became a big old show off again. Especially the French all started eating them again. With that increased popularity, some clever people tried to start cultivating them. And the first attempts were in 1790, and they were kind of had mixed results. The people doing it did work out that if you take roots and acorns from trees that already have truffles on them and then plant those, you're much more likely to get truffles on the new trees that you plant. So once they had kind of worked out how to grow more truffles than reliant on luck, this then coincided in the 19th century with a couple of unlucky epidemics on the local what they normally grow. So there was something killed off all of the vineyards, and then something killed off all of the mulberry bushes. And because of this, a load of people in the south of France planted truffle orchards instead. And so in sort of the late 19th century, you couldn't move for truffles in France. There was like everyone was growing truffles everywhere. And in 1890, they harvested 2,000 tons of truffles. This is when the French really got their taste for them. But weirdly, well, not necessarily that weirdly, but somewhat surprisingly, the production of truffles dropped by between 97 and 99% in the 20th century. And they mostly put that down to the two world wars that took place across France.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that maybe it might have been.
But because of that, all of the knowledge of how to grow truffles and everything, and
which is what Willy says in the thing, isn't it? It's like the knowledge has been forgotten.
Basically, yeah, they'd all forgotten about it, and so truffles, big truffle slump for most of the 20th century. And it was only now, actually, around this time that this episode came out, that there was like another sort of attempt to get back into making truffles on a large scale, and this was the new method. This method of sort of basically you inoculate the roots with the truffle mycelium, and you establish them actually within the roots, and then plant those, and you've got guaranteed truffles. Then there's much lower risk of a barren root system. You're almost certainly going to get some truffles in there. But yeah, so since then it's been a growing industry. These days they reckon that around 80% of the truffles that France produces are from these specially planted, cultivated truffle groves. And also this has allowed as well it to spread to other countries. You've got obviously France and Italy and Spain. They already had them there. So it tends to be quite a dry country. You need to be quite a dry soil for them to grow. So
Well,
presumably why
watching the video, I was surprised by how shaly the ground was.
Yeah.
It didn't look like it could sustain anything else, to be fair.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. It has to be quite sort of either chalky or sandy soil. So I think that's probably why we can't necessarily grow them in Britain very much. But Australia and New Zealand, they've got on the truffle train. The first truffles grown in New Zealand was in 1999, and in Australia, I think it was 2002, something like that. And then the Americans have jumped on board now. They started growing them in Tennessee in 2007. So it's actually still quite a modern industry,
Yes,
really.
That's true, yeah.
So maybe that's why we're only starting to see it turn up and everything, because it only now, has it become more of a commercialized, industry.
They managed to just about get it to a certain scale.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's a very expensive industry. It's one of those sort of high risk, high reward type things where you have to invest a lot of money in your plantation. They reckon it costs about €10,000 per hectare to run a truffle plantation, which is far higher than any other sort of plantation you might have. But obviously truffles are still very expensive. And they still use either dogs or pigs to get them. You can't hunt them by machine. You still have to use a dog or a pig. In Italy, it's illegal to use pigs though, because they cause too much of a trouble. They mess the ground up too much. So you have to use a dog. And I did come across this excellent sort of table explaining the relative pros and cons of a truffle dog and a truffle hog. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Comparison of truffle dog and hog. It's called. In column A, we've got truffle dog. Truffle dog.
Yep.
First thing, keen sense of smell.
Yep.
Truffle hog, first thing is keen sense of smell.
Brilliant. Wow. Honours even. Okay, next.
Next one. Truffle dog,
Yeah.
must be trained.
Must be trained.
Yes.
Okay.
Truffle hog, innate ability to sniff out truffles.
Wow. That's incredible.
I think you got to tick one down for the hog. There.
Yeah, that's one for the hog. Yeah.
Number 3.
Yeah.
Truffle dog, easier to control.
Yeah.
Truffle,
yeah. Well, they're trained.
Truffle hog, tendency to eat truffles, what is found.
Yeah, which feels like the one thing you don't want to happen.
And that's it. That's a table.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's one draw and one each.
It's dead heat, really, there, which is presumably why as long as outside Italy, both are used. Would you like to purchase some truffles, Mark? I've been.
Yes, I would. Yeah.
Tartufo.com gave me a price list as of February the 26th. So this is the most recent prices I could find.
Okay.
And this is prices per kilogram of a variety of truffles.
Okay.
So you've got the Bianchetto truffle, absolute dirt cheap, Mark. Real sort of bottom of the barrel stuff this is. That's €390 per kilo. Then you've got the Black Summer truffle, €530 per kilo. Then the Black Autumn truffle, €680 per kilo. Then the Fine Black truffle, €850 per kilo.
Wow.
And then absolutely rinsing the rest of them, we have the White Alba truffle. That's an absolute socking great. €2,780 per kilo. I mean,
I don't think I've tried that.
I've never tried white truffle. I mean, good lord.
To the best of my knowledge, I haven't. At those prices, Russ, I better start making space because currently I have not much room.
Oh, you're such a fun guy.
Hey!
And I think probably the most entertaining part of this segment is, of course, the last bit where we see an incredibly stereotypical French chef with the full chef's garb and a beautiful
with the ratatouille hat.
Yeah, beautiful big moustache and sideburns,
pitch black.
Yes, yeah. He's knocking up, and it took me a while to decode Willy Wooly's thick,
well done.
What is it? Thick French accent.
It's so fluent. Yeah,
but it is the omelette aux truffes du Périgord, and Périgord is a place in
place. Yeah.
It's a traditional French truffle omelette recipe. I found it on a traditional French truffle omelette
Yeah.
recipe page.
I see it was just omelette plus truffle equals...
Well, I found this is the traditional recipe apparently, and
Okay.
I can't. I mean, talk about stereotypical French recipe.
How much butter?
you need an entire truffle for a start, right? So one whole truffle, 50 milliliters of cognac,
Jeez.
4 eggs, 50 mil.
4 eggs. It's a 4-egg omelette.
50 milliliters of double cream, salt and pepper, and a tablespoon of goose or duck fat.
Jeez.
That's
Cannot
pretty.
imagine.
I mean, that's pretty rich, isn't it? That is pretty rich.
It's because the thing is, when we watch it, he puts so much truffle in. It is unreal.
Yeah.
Which goes to what you and I were saying. It's like a little bit goes so long.
Yeah.
It's like actually just like a little bit of. It's like it's a bit of seasoning. So the fact that he just chops up an entire truffle and puts it in.
Must be.
Like I cannot imagine. Like it must be. His fucking half his face would be blasted off with truffle.
Must be
flavor.
eye-watering, mustn't it? I mean.
Yeah. He definitely makes some faces when he eats it. Like he's trying to pretend he's enjoying it, but he's probably half cut at that point with all the cognac. But it is an incredible amount of truffle. I don't think I've seen that much truffle.
No. I imagine in the 1970s, the average Frenchman smoked a lot, didn't they?
Oh, that's true.
So maybe
Good
they
point,
needed that much truffle to cut through the thick layer of tar on their taste buds.
Well, sure, our reassuringly grubby French farmer, when he's out with his hairy wife and kid, he is smoking, and he has to take it out of his mouth to smell the truffle, and then he makes a really wonderful face. Oh, this is fantastic! But yeah, he's puffing away, isn't he? Can't imagine what the ashtray in his Renault 5 is like.
Right. Well, on to the next course then, I think.
Yummers.
This cow is in calf. She's pregnant, and that's very good news for her owners because she's a very valuable Charolais worth £2,500. Even better news, and almost incredible, is the fact that she may produce 20 calves next year. Let me explain. 11 days ago, she was given a special hormone called PMS, pregnant mare serum, which increased enormously her fertility. She was then artificially inseminated from a prize bull ambassador, and now the fertilized eggs are being removed from her uterus. Now that normally requires surgery, but here in Ireland they've developed a non-surgical technique for doing this, and Tony McDonough of the Belclare Research Institute is actually flushing the fertile eggs from her uterus into this container. May I take it now, Tony? Now, in there might be as many as 20 fertile eggs, but of course all may not necessarily be perfect, and so each one has to be examined under the microscope. A healthy egg looks like this, with the cells developing like a bunch of grapes. An unhealthy egg looks like this. You can see the cells already beginning to break down, so obviously that wouldn't produce a healthy calf. Now, normally, a cow can produce 1 calf a year. There's a very small chance of twins, 1 shot in 50. This technique can increase enormously the productivity of any healthy cow. But of course, collecting healthy fertilized eggs is one thing. Producing a healthy calf is quite another.
The secret is to implant those fertile eggs into other cows. Any other cows will do as long as they're healthy. This is a Hereford-Friesian cross. And providing they're in the same period in their fertile cycle as the cow which has produced the eggs. The implantation is done using this ordinary AI gun. And what the skilled technician does is implant the fertile eggs into the foster mother's uterus. Now look at this model. You can see that the uterus actually has 2 very distinct horns. And what Tony is now about to try and do is implant 1 fertile egg into each of these 2 horns.
What would you say is your favourite of the standard farm animals, Mark?
As in, what would if I was forced to farm? What would I pick?
Just,
Or just like, what do I like?
Yeah, some people like dogs, some people like cats. But I mean, in terms of farm animals, what do you think like? Sheep, pig, cow, or horse, or chicken?
Sheep, pig, cow. I think
goose.
fuck a goose. Jesus Christ, dangerous little shits, aren't they? I would like goats, but I find their eyes creepy. Partly because they just seem really playful and fun. I think I respect the horse the most, so I'd probably go horse. Like, I think a cow can be... You do see videos, don't you, of like cows who are like pets, like they run up to people and they just want to be hugged and stuff like that. But they're so fucking huge that if they fell on you, you would die. Sheep just seem like idiots.
Yeah,
So
there is something about a sheep that just comes. They do come across as significantly more stupid than the other farm animals.
Yeah, but I think horse probably. But then I used to ride horses, so you know. What about you? Because you're more of a country guy. You've seen these more up close than I have.
I think the pig. I think it's the pig.
Pigs are good though. But then I mean the problem is I do associate pigs with muck, which is obviously again not their fault. But the thing about the pig is like they just seem too smart. I think they're more worthy of our respect, and like they're closer to us as peers. It's like, how are you supposed to what kind of sociopath sends a pig to slaughter? So I think in a moral reason, not a moral reason, but like I just think I would struggle a bit with a pig, and they remind me too much of vampire bats, as we discussed last time.
But yes, well, anyway, this is our first strong bit of cow content here.
Sorry, what's the word, Russ?
Oh, cow tent?
Thank you. Yeah, cow tent, yeah.
And I hadn't noticed until just then, Mark, on our shared documents, and you give all of these segments your own little titles, and you very cleverly called this one "Birth Earth," which it's very good. I noticed that.
I was pleased with that one.
It was good.
That tickled me anyway. Birth Earth.
To say this is another one of these sort of ones where I think it feels like we're seeing the start of something which is clearly an important bit of farming.
Yes.
I don't think it's a big surprise to anybody at home that this has made it to the future. This is like a massive part of farming. The whole idea of artificially inseminating or artificially implanting embryos in livestock in order to get them to have more children or better children.
Is it too extreme to call it cowgenics?
yeah, I guess it is. Yeah,
but it is. Yeah, like this kind of advanced level, like using science and animal husbandry is it's a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And it seems like this is the very beginning of it. I mean, the way Raymond's describing it, saying they've only just started doing this, and it's something that happens, multiple times a day these days. I always wondered about vets, right? When we were at school, I don't know whether is this still a thing that happens when people go to school. When you're about, how old were we? About 14 or something. We were all had to go on work experience for a week, didn't we?
Yes, that's right. About 14 or 15. Yeah,
I was quite lucky. My dad knew a vet. I can't remember whether he either cleaned his windows or mowed his lawns, one of the two. But he knew a very nice vet whose name I think was Richard. So I did my work experience with him, and my only sort of knowledge of vets prior to that was watching All Creatures Great and Small.
Of course.
And obviously the one thing you always remember about All Creatures Great and Small is that the lead characters spend almost all of their time with their hand up a cow's bum.
Right up there, yeah.
And upon doing this week's worth of work experience with this vet, I discovered that is entirely true. Vets really do spend almost all of their day with their hand up a cow's bum.
Did you partake?
No. I was not entrusted with the shoulder-length rubber gloves. But it's astonishing. It seems like almost anything can either be cured or diagnosed by putting a hand up a cow's bum.
Including like RSI injuries possibly on the vet.
Oh, hello, Mr. Vet. There's something wrong with my cow's teeth. Righto. At the moment goes. And that's, he spent his days doing that. We saw some horses as well. But for some reason, horses... You don't put your hand up a horse's bum, though, Mark. Their bums remain completely untouched. It's only cows. I don't know why different diagnostic methods are needed for the two different. You'd think it'd be similar, but no. But yeah, in this case, we see the vets, and he's working on this cow.
Well, we meet the vet, and he's shoulder length in, isn't he? He's all the way up. He's already in. Yeah. There's literally no beating around the bush. Straight in.
Yeah, and there's a few droppings splodging out of the cow's backside there.
Yeah.
And then
leavings,
yeah. And then he produces for Raymond's. Was it
cocktail glass?
Yes, well, that's the thing. It's a martini. When Raymond collects it appears to be a martini glass. A martini glass with sort of some pink liquid in it, which is presumably is it the cow's eggs in some sort of egg juice or something like that?
The implication is that your man has his arm right up a cow, and as I say, you see the little droppings, little splodges of shit floundering out, and then he leans down and he just produces this martini glass, as you say, this kind of clear pink liquid, and we're supposed to believe that somehow, in his shitty hand, he has managed to find a few little drops of clear liquid that he's put into this, or scrapings. I don't know. Like I don't know, and in a weird way, I don't want to. But like it didn't. Let's just say the imagery that we are first given on this glass of egg,
which looks like it should have like an olive, on a cocktail.
It does.
stick
It really does look like it looks like a kind of a slightly measly cocktail, but a cocktail nonetheless. But there's a disconnect. There is no way this martini glass came from image A, as far as I'm concerned.
No, but anyway, Raymond immediately bungs it under a microscope, and we see that there's eggs in there, and then it's explained to us that these are going to be fertilized and then inserted into another cow. Well,
Multiple cows.
Because then, of course, I forgot to mention, we then go to Michael Rod. For some reason, Raymond only does the first half, and then Rod does the second half. Is it because Baxter's alpha, so he does the?
Oh yeah.
Does that first bit, the prize, the prize?
That's it.
And then Rod does the.
He's too big to explain stuff these days.
Rod's got that lovely model of a cow's internal organs.
It is
good enough to eat.
Horrible. It is the worst model I believe we've seen so far. It is unpleasant. And the thing is, like when we cut to Rod, he looks disgusted and shocked at the same time. Like they're just for the first half a second, he just looks like he just doesn't want to be there. And when he then has to get his grubby mitts in this horrible model of half a cow's carcass.
It looks like it could actually be made from an actual carcass.
A mini cow. Yeah, it really does. Yeah, like, was it Dr. Von...
Von Murderberg, or whatever his name was, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually his name, isn't it? Yeah. His body works. It looks like one of those, but only if there's like, is there such a thing as a Shetland cow? I don't know. But like, it's just the whole thing is just unpleasant. Even the fact that the cow's uterus has horns.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I was also interested in the prices here, Mark.
Cow prices. This is the first of two segments where the cow is described or discussed in terms of unit cost.
2,500 for the first one.
That vet has an expensive glove.
And I looked at, obviously punched that into the old inflation calculator.
Oh, yeah. How much?
£15,420 that's worth today.
That seems like a lot of money.
That's the good quality cow that they're extracting all of the eggs from. And then they can then implant them in an absolute bog standard cow.
Well, so he discussed the fact that this new approach to animal husbandry vastly increases the opportunity to have twins, which obviously is a very effective and efficient way of producing new cows. And we meet two of these expensive twin cows who have a combined unit cost of 1,200 quid. Yeah. Then we are introduced to their shamed mother, their actual birth mother, who is worth only 250 quid and doesn't even look at the camera. She's been shamed so much. It's heartbreaking.
So, hang on a minute, we can just do the maths there, can't we? So she's worth these days
1,500 quid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's half a Ford 3,600 or whatever.
Yeah. And presumably, as soon as she gives birth to those stunning twins there, they just immediately send her off to the burger factory or whatever.
Might try and make her do another one, but yeah. But the second she starts producing Danny DeVito versions of the twins, straight down the burger factory.
Do you think there's like a sort of almost like a one-upmanship between vets and doctors, where vets just think, could have been a doctor easily, but I've got the bravery to put my hand up a cow's arse, so I've got to be a vet.
I don't know. My brother's brother-in-law is a country vet. I will ask him next time. I have a suspicion that doctors are still probably feel that they're above vets, but then doctors can cheat by asking people what's wrong with them in a way that vets just can't. Yeah,
and
also, absolutely cheating.
And also, doctors only treat humans who are all the same species.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas a vet has to treat anything from like a bird to a lizard to
you're right. Yeah,
blue whale.
Spectrum.
But yeah, anyway, cow insemination. The big cow he talks about at the start there, Charolais cow. It won't be the last time we mentioned Charolais cows in this episode.
Who, by the way, I thought looked a bit like Raymond Baxter.
Yeah.
Same hairstyle and everything.
One of the heaviest of all cattle breeds, Mark.
Ooh.
A male can weigh up to 1,650 kilograms. And I think probably one of the ones that might weigh that much is that one we're showing a photo of, Ambassador.
Oh.
It's like Arnold Schwarzenegger, isn't it?
Yeah, bloody hell. Talk about hench.
Keep that in mind, Mark, because there's some
beefy unit, Ambassador.
There's some decent hench bull content coming later.
Oh.
Raymond calls this, he says that this cow has been treated with what he calls PMS. Look that up.
Yes, he
It's
does.
called,
Yeah.
It stands for pregnant mare serum.
You did call it that.
And it actually is literally, it does what it says on the tin. They extract it from pregnant mares, but it's a hormone. The hormone works on all mammals. It doesn't need to be specifically for horses. So they extract it from the horses, and they can stick it in a sheep, they can stick it in a cow. It'll have the same effects, and all that happens is it basically turbo boosts their reproductive cycle, so they can have children much more rapidly and in quicker rotation. So that's what they stick in that. Her reproductive cycle starts. And then that's why they can then get the eggs out of her. Once they've got the eggs out of her, then they then get some semen from prize bulls like Ambassador, and those bulls their semen can be responsible for like hundreds of thousands of cows over the years. The prize bulls that have the sort of genetic qualities that they want, there's actually incredibly few of them, and they inseminate loads and loads and loads of the cattle. So all around the world, they have hundreds of thousands of offspring, all done by artificial insemination these days. The embryos get fertilised, and there's a thing called ET, embryo transmission, it's called these days. And it's primarily used for sort of like high quality beef and dairy cattle. You wouldn't just use it for anything. You could still use the old fashioned method if you've just got a bog standard dairy herd or whatever. And it can be done with fresh eggs or frozen eggs. Fresh eggs have a success rate of 70%. Frozen eggs have a success rate of 60%. And you can get yourself some embryos on the internet, Mark.
Brilliant.
I went on brangusworld.com. Would you like to know how much an embryo costs on brangusworld.com, Mark?
Yeah, I would actually. Go on then.
The cheapest embryos they sell are still pretty good quality embryos. So they're from a top 25% cow herd. And those are $525 per embryo, US dollars. But the absolute top of the shop, if you want an absolute super cow, you can get CX Super Elite embryos, which are the product of grand champions breeding with grand champions.
Wow.
That suggests to me that they've got cows that play chess. Is that like
yeah.
$2,500 per embryo, Mark? I was thinking, but imagine shelling out $2,500 for an embryo.
Gosh.
And then it doesn't take root.
Well, no, I suppose I was thinking, like, well, what do I get Josie for Christmas? Do I get her a white truffle, or do I get her a CX top champion embryo?
If you're going to get her that one of those, make sure it's in a lovely martini glass, though, Mark, when you serve it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we do have a nice one, so I'll make sure I pass it over.
I think, actually, maybe combine the two. You get a martini glass with the embryo in it, and then get a truffle on a cocktail stick and stick that in there.
Oh, my God. Thank God I'm made of money. I don't know which is more criminal and morally reprehensible to waste.
Tastes delicious, though, wouldn't it? Imagine the flavour on that.
Ooh, yeah. Like a kind of a mushroomy bovril.
Working in a car factory may seem a far cry from the open-air life of a farm, but Manfred van Beek considers himself a farmer, not a factory worker. He's one of an estimated 400,000 part-time farmers in West Germany, almost half the farming population. These are people who, as well as having a small farm, do some other work. In Manfred's case, the farm work slots in neatly with his factory shift work. Today, it's been an early shift, and he's back at the farm just after lunch. Much of the day-to-day running is left to Frau van Beek, and that's mainly looking after the animals, particularly the cows. Small farmers always have a few cows. Often they're not very good quality. Usually they're reared in a very traditional way. But because their milk provides a regular income, they're considered vital by the farmer. Manfred picks up around £300 from the dairy in a good month. The great European milk surplus is due in part at least to the small farmer's total reluctance to part with his cows. And that's typical of the problem of trying to introduce more efficient farming in Europe. The community's aim is for larger farms and more specialisation. But most small farmers have just the opposite philosophy. Spread the risk. A few hens, a few pigs, a couple of acres of wheat, a couple of acres of maize, and so on. Because there are so many of them, the small farmers can't be ignored politically. Any common market policy has to cater for them, and to a certain extent, there are inefficiencies. And the arrival of the part-time farmer is giving the small farmer a new lease of life. The additional cash from the factory is more than enough to keep an otherwise hopelessly unprofitable farm going. As long as farmers like Van Beek keep their factory jobs, they can more or less ignore attempts from Brussels to reform the industry. As far as Germany is concerned, the inefficient small farmer is far from dead.
Vorsprung pork technique, Mark.
Oh, somebody's been sitting on that, haven't they?
I mean, this is just the Germans showing off, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely was blown away because what I've learned is that the Germans of the 1970s could apparently knock out a car in the morning at a high quality futuristic car manufacturing plant before then just meandering home at lunch and continuing to run a pretty, they imply inefficient, but how about I say a small holding that covers all bases? And all whilst maintaining political power just in sheer numbers. I mean, they are way ahead.
It's astonishing, absolutely astonishing. How long was his shift? Why is the car job not a full-time job? I don't understand. How does that even...
Didn't need to be. He's not British. He can do it in half the time, clearly.
Yeah, it's amazing. Oh, I have to say, he still looked very much like a farmer, even in the car factory.
Yeah.
He didn't look like a car factory worker. He looked like a farmer.
Yeah.
He had that red, shiny face that farmers have. Does that come from overconsumption of pork products? Where does that come from?
Oh, it's wind blasting, I think. Yeah.
It is. And I think the first sighting of a pair of overalls in this episode, but certainly not the last.
Oh gosh, no. And actually, should be said the second. You are right. The second of 3 Willy Woolly narrated segments.
Yeah. I mean, it's a toss-up between overalls and cows as to what is the most seen thing in this episode. I mean, this doesn't even give us any technological advancement at all, does it? It's literally just telling us what German people do, German farm stroke automobile engineer people do. Of a day.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Honestly, truly. I mean, unless the hat that Manfred Van Beck wears is some kind of future hat, then we learn nothing. We learn nothing in it. I think I learned a lot, which is like you look at this and you look at what was happening in Britain at the time, like the Leyland factory, and you're like, well, one of these two countries has a future.
Yeah. And also, I mean, of course, I recognise the car that he was building there, Mark. He was building...
Of course he did.
He's building a Mark 1 Volkswagen Polo, and which actually originally was an Audi. It was originally the Audi 50, until they realised that nobody wants to buy a small Audi hatchback. So they rebadged it, you fool, as the Volkswagen Polo. But Volkswagen Polos, great cars. Superb build quality, very reliable, lovely bit of kit. And he's just knocking them out as he's basically his paper rounds.
Yes, that's exactly correct. Yeah, his paper round.
Yeah.
And then he goes back and Frau Van Beck hands over the reins of the small holding, which again looks like they run it pretty effectively.
Yeah, he's got cows, pigs, and geese there, I think.
He's living the life of Riley. He could smile more, but
Willy Woolly seems to
stoic.
Willy Woolly seems to be obsessed with the idea of efficiency,
which is ironic from the BBC. But...
Yeah. I mean, as long as Manfred's happy, I can't really see the issue here.
That's the thing that got me. Is like, well, so Manfred has decided that he'd like to top up his income from his small holding farm by becoming an advanced car manufacturer. So what's the problem? Now, we do get the first indication of something that I know I became obsessed with as a child, and maybe you did as well.
Yeah.
He starts talking about the inefficiency of these farms leading to food surpluses. Because obviously, if Europe had an entire network of very efficient, effective farming, we'd make what we need and no more. And maybe you'd make enough maybe to sell abroad. But like you would have the exact right amount to maintain the farms, create a profit, supply the innate desires of the European population, and then sell to whatever demand there is abroad. Problem with having these small holdings dotted throughout Europe is that they produce what they produce. And there is no real way of controlling the demand or the supply, so you end up with food surpluses. And you and I, when we were growing up, maybe you made the same mistake I did, but whenever I used to hear about the European butter mountain, I think it took me a strangely long time to realise that there wasn't literally a mountain of butter somewhere in Europe that was in itself surrounded by the great European milk lake.
Yes, yeah. It was the inevitably the one that stuck in my head was always the wine lake.
Oh,
It was the butter mountain, the milk lake, and the wine lake. And there was a beef mountain as well, I think, possibly.
There was a beef mountain at one point, you're absolutely right.
The lakes, in my mind, I always remember thinking, well, they can't have it outside because it would get contaminated.
Yes,
So
how...
for some reason, I started to picture in my mind, they'd basically hollowed out a mountain in the Alps, and it was like a huge cavern with a subterranean lake inside it. and that's where they were pumping it into, something like that. That was kind of where my mind was going.
For me, I used to think about the butter mountain and thinking like, but what happens in summer? So then I thought, well, like, do you know what, Mark? You're being stupid. It must be indoors. It must be refrigerated.
I was wondering, what happened to these? They don't exist anymore, Mark.
No, they don't. And I kind of assumed that, frankly, farming just became much more efficient and effective.
We could probably do with them these days, couldn't we? The cost of living crisis, absolutely.
That's
chip
true.
Away at that mountain. Apparently, he said, milk production in West Germany increased from 75 million tons in 1960 to 100 million tons in 1979. The butter mountain got so big that the West German government had to start selling butter themselves at discounted prices to people at home. It's trying and shift it. Oh, I would have bought plenty. I'm a big fan of butter, Mark.
It's very good.
Delicious.
And anyone who watches MasterChef The Professionals will know that apparently it is the ingredient. It is the secret ingredient that you add to literally every dish.
Yeah.
Every dish has a healthy chunk of butter in there.
That is, yeah. That's the secret. Isn't it? It's the secret to French cuisine, isn't it? Is butter.
Yeah, it definitely boor.
Cream. Yeah, but the last of the mountains disappeared in 2017, apparently.
That's more recent than you'd think, wouldn't it? What was the last mountain to go?
I think it was milk. Yes, it was milk. Yeah, it was milk because
Milk Lake.
Because it was. I read it in the same article as I discovered that this was good news for Africa because for many years, in order to try and get rid of the milk lake, we were dumping it on Africa at rock bottom prices and essentially
so now they can actually charge
and destroying the African dairy industry. So
well
that's quite good that we've stopped doing that. That was kind of my only real research there was into mountains and lakes because it wasn't a great deal I could research on this segment because it was just
like you didn't research the Mark 1 polo. Of course you fucking looked that up. But no, there's nothing to say. We can't say anything went into the future. I assume the Van Becks might have had a kid, so maybe their name has continued, but we have no evidence.
Yeah, I did. Obviously, I did look up. I tried to find Manfred Van Beck. I didn't find any Manfred Van Becks on the internet. Too busy at work, isn't he, to have an internet presence? I doubt he's got a TikTok or an Instagram. Although with that incredible hat that he's wearing, you probably build a following around that. It's very touch of the Scar band about it to me. I don't know whether what sort of hat would you call that? What is that hat?
For me, it most reminded me of like an American train engineer's hat. That kind of weird, slightly tall, but like it is also kind of borderline the kind of hat that a Rastafarian, like a young Rastafarian that hasn't got a huge amount of hair, but like just enough to require slightly more vertical space than seems normal for any hat.
Didn't one of Roland Rat's associates wear one? Which
that's
one was
right.
it? It wasn't Kevin the
It wasn't Kevin.
Hang on. Or am I thinking of the Hofmeister bear?
Oh, actually, he had a hat like that, didn't he? No, but oh god, yeah, maybe we're both thinking of the same. Yeah, I think you're thinking of the Hofmeister bear. He had a hat like that.
I'm just
because he was German.
Oh yeah, is that? Hang on.
I have to say, by the way, if you're listening at home, this here is much more mine and Russell's dynamic.
Yeah,
talk about something and then immediately look it up on the internet for
that's what
30
it is.
seconds.
Because obviously the Hofmeister bear does look like one of Roland Rat's friends. To be fair,
it's
the Hofmeister bear. He's wearing the Hofmeister bear's hat. That's what he's wearing.
Yeah.
I mean, which is not surprising. Hofmeister's a German beer, isn't it? Oh, look how cool the Hofmeister bear is. That yellow satin bomber jacket. That's amazing. That would be a good fancy dress outfit.
Judy Zooks. Oh my god. Yeah, but how many? Yeah, you say that, but like, how many people would know what you're doing? I was basically the one person who recognised it would either be your future husband or your sworn enemy. Because it's not going to be a woman. I'm sorry, Russ. It's not going to be a woman.
Well, I mean, I'm glad I've solved that little mystery. That makes that a segment all completely worth it.
Oh, let me just write down Hofmeister bear in my.
Who wore it better, Manfred Van Beck
absolutely.
or the Hofmeister bear?
6 months ago, we showed the next generation of tractor cab, the Q or quiet cab. Well, like many technological innovations, it's not without its problems. Here's Caroline Erskine of RTE.
The basic idea is that a sealed capsule of a cab will make a far more comfortable working place for a driver. Well, when it was first introduced, all the equipment controls were on the outside, and that rather defeated the object of the quiet Q cab. Some hydraulic and mechanical controls are being put inside now, but not all of them. Take this seed drill, for example. If I wanted to close off certain rows, I'd have to get a helping hand. Thank you, Michael Rod. Or else I'd have to get down myself. But now a Midlands engineer has come up with a control system that almost certainly points the way tractors are going. Electronic push-button control. All I have to do is switch on the box like so, and the amber light tells me that everything's connected and ready to go. The green light on the left tells me that the seed rows are open, and to close the relevant seed rows, I press the button on the left, and the red light tells me that those rows are now closed off. Saves a lot of toing and froing, and of course there's no reason why this box can't be connected up with other equipment too.
But controlling equipment isn't the only problem associated with the Q-cab. When I'm spraying pesticides and chemicals, I ought to be wearing protective clothing and, in some instances, even a respirator as well. Now, you may think that with the advent of air conditioning and Q-cabs, such protection is not necessary. But no matter how efficient the filtration system and how sophisticated the controls are inside the cab, the moment has to come when I get out. And no matter how careful I am, I'm bound sooner or later to get some of the chemical on my clothing. In the old-fashioned days of the open cab, no problem, because the passage of wind would have blown the dangerous chemicals well away. Not so with a cab like this. Inside that comfortable, warm atmosphere, the heat loosens the chemicals, releasing it into that environment, ready for me to breathe in. Technology had to find another answer. Whilst the Q-cab protects me from the elements, this equipment protects me from the Q-cab. Of course, they may now have to start redesigning the Q-cab. But then, that's modern farming.
When I first watched this was the point where it suddenly immediately struck that this 1976, this is 20 years before the last episode that we watched, episode from 1996.
1996, yeah.
And I realised that, so this episode is 20 years from Philippa Forrester's robot vacuum cleaner.
Yep.
Which is actually 27 years from us now.
Yeah.
And yet, here they are, apparently demonstrating the incredibly high-tech concept of people being able to drive tractors with a roof over their head.
Yep, and a door.
Yeah. As if that's a new amazing thing. How did they manage to go from roofs and doors on tractors to robot vacuum cleaners in less time than has been since the robot vacuum cleaner to us?
The other thing that got me is that these are called Q-cabs or quiet cabs. And it only dawned on me the third time watching just now, I couldn't hear a word that Caroline said. It's like I could hear, but it's more like, I was just one of those things like, oh wow, that selling point, this is not a good example of the selling point of this quiet cab. Ironically, for ages, I couldn't quite work out what the name of the thing was.
Yeah, I thought they were saying cube cab.
Yeah, and it's not.
No,
it
it's
is
Q
quiet
cab.
cab. Yeah, Q-cab, which is short for quiet cab. And then I thought, like, oh, well, the irony of not being able to hear what the name of the quiet cab is. This is a joy, isn't it? This whole bit.
This is some quality Rod clowning, isn't it? Some proper physical comedy from Rod here.
Yeah, I mean, and none of it deliberate.
No.
I am certain none of it's deliberate. This is the humour of someone who does not know they're being humorous.
Because we don't even know it's going to be a Rod segment initially. Because first of all, I mean, excitingly, a new presenter, a presenter we've never seen before, and possibly I'm wondering whether this is the only.
I'd say so, yeah.
Episode we ever see her on, because she's from RTE.
She's RTE's finest.
I always like that.
Caroline Erskine.
I can't do it, but I always like the way Irish people pronounce RTE, because they don't say RTE, they always say RTE.
Well, I mean, when I first came here, I had to relearn how to pronounce that letter because it's or.
Yeah, well, I was really like that when
RTE.
people say RTE.
Yeah, though funny enough, when you say it, it doesn't sound right.
Yeah, weird, isn't it? Yeah.
I can't. I don't know what it is, but it's like, ash in my ears, or it's just being shoveled around. I don't know what it is. It sounds very upsetting. No, it's RTE.
You should be very proud of the fact that I've refrained from doing any of my Irish accents so far this episode.
Oh, your celebrated Irish accents, Russ.
Yeah. I'm doing the full gamut.
How very brave of you. Yeah. How very brave of you not to be a horrible racist on a recorded podcast that you yourself will then release.
If I'm good, can I do my Reverend Ian Paisley at some point?
Oh, cool. Oh, there's no problem with that.
Okay.
No problem with that. No, never. That's 100% different. RTE, Radio Telefish Éireann. And I had to learn how to change my pronunciation of that word, that letter, because people would not understand what you were saying if you were spelling out something.
Right, yeah.
So, I'm Mark, so my name is M-A-R-K, but if you went M-A-R-K, people go like A or K?
Mork?
I don't understand.
All right, Robin Williams.
Well, no, it's more like, is it M-K or is it M-A? How can it be A or K? I don't understand.
Oh, yeah. So,
And it's like,
yeah,
oh, yeah.
yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay. And that's a bad example, but like, that was definitely something that happened to me. And so you just I had to relearn it. Whereas like, you don't if you're in Ireland because that's how they pronounce it.
But why do you think, why have they got Caroline Erskine from RTE here? Why?
No, don't say that. Why? I don't
Is it
know.
because Willy Woolley couldn't be bothered to go to Ireland?
No.
And they
well,
needed
later on in the closing credits, we can see that this is a co-production with RTE
and
with NOS,
yes,
the magical Dutch channel NOS, the three public broadcasters of the relevant countries. So it makes sense then if it's going to be some kind of co-production. So I assume, because I think you allude to this later on in the notes, Ireland and Holland are the Netherlands are two of the places that actually get the BBC anyway.
Well, that was this is what I was thinking. So why is it a co-production with those channels? Are they going to show it on those channels, or are they just going to?
I think it's a really interesting question because, like, I grew up watching the BBC because I lived in Dublin. Now, I know that not everywhere in Ireland had the BBC. Dublin definitely did, and obviously anywhere in and around the borders around Northern Ireland would have got the BBC, but I don't think everywhere necessarily did. They certainly didn't get Channel 4 when it came along, because I remember listening to a podcast where Aisling B was talking about Father Ted.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And she watched it when she went to France or something like that. She was on a school trip to France. She wasn't able to see it. She'd never heard of it, basically. And then she saw this thing in France and then tried to track it down. So BBC was definitely on in Dublin when I was there in the 80s. Whether it was in 76, I don't know. So I assume, but don't know, I'm assuming they must have shown this on RTE. But then perhaps they just showed Tomorrow's World anyway. Because the thing about my memory of kind of having RTE growing up was that a suspiciously large number of programs were on RTE that were also on the BBC, if you see what I mean. So like that, like I'd swear RTE would also show like EastEnders like half an hour later or something like that, which to my mind, it was like, as a child, it just used to hurt my head. Like, why the hell are two different channels showing exactly the same program, almost at exactly the same time? And then you learn later on that not everywhere has access to the BBC, so they're just showing BBC stuff because, they got it not for free, but they got it, like a knockdown price. So it's distinctly possible that they showed Tomorrow's World anyway, and so that was the kind of, well, if you're going to be in Ireland, you might as well do it with us. The curious thing is that why is there no equivalent with the Dutch? What did NOS do to help produce this? And surely they would have just shown it anyway. I don't understand. Yeah, it did beg a few questions, didn't it?
I don't know whether this is a case of confirmation bias, but there does seem to be a lot of Dutch content on Tomorrow's World.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of confirmation bias, but yeah, I think you're not actually, because I think we came across a YouTube video, didn't we, of like Willy Woolley showing
driving
off
a
the
funny
new trams.
little car.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the electric powered car thing. Yeah. Like which we haven't come across in a real episode yet, but I'm sure we will. But then I suppose if you talk about two countries obviously that have a relationship with the BBC, But then my feeling about Caroline Erskine was that she was a little bit of local flavour. Now, like, if you're going to be there, you might as well have her. But it also kind of doesn't make sense, because you do wonder, is like, really would RTE and NOS only show this one episode of Tomorrow's World and then never show another episode ever again? That seems highly unlikely.
One of the things that I only found out past few years, which I'd never knew, is that not only do the Dutch and the Irish receive BBC, they do actually pay for a portion of the licence fee. They don't get it for free. So a portion of the BBC's licence fee income actually comes from the Dutch and the Irish, which I thought was quite interesting. So I don't know whether it is back then in 1976, whether RTE and NOS are like sort of the go-betweens, and they're the ones responsible for giving the BBC a wedge of the licence fee. And
well, I mean, there is a licence fee in Ireland.
Yeah, so maybe...
So I'm assuming the RTE licence fee, a proportion of that must go to the BBC then.
Yeah, so maybe...
And hence then they get, like...
Maybe that gives them a bit of a...
low-price access to the BBC. Yeah. That must be how it works then.
Caroline Erskine, though, Mark.
Yes.
Do you remember seeing Caroline Erskine on Irish television at all when you were a kid?
It doesn't ring a bell.
Oh, shoot.
To be fair, she looks like my mum in old pictures of my mum at the same time, so maybe I do. Maybe I just thought my mum was on TV.
But yes, I found Caroline Erskine's LinkedIn page, Mark.
Oh, yeah? Does she run a kind of a media relations business?
How did you guess? Her LinkedIn claims that she worked for RTE from 1981 to 2001. Now,
Well, she must have worked there in 1976.
yeah,
then.
exactly. So,
She-
is she forgetful, or is she trying to claim that she's younger than she is, or is she ashamed of her Tomorrow's World work?
Well, maybe she was maybe she only actually was a RTE employee from 1981 or something like that. And like before then, she was freelance.
She does seem quite green, doesn't she? Because she's the one presenter in this episode
Yes.
who makes a number of verbal
Yes.
slip-ups.
Yes. Oh, almost to the point where you think like, well, why wouldn't anyone suggest to her that she could do it again?
Well, is it not? Is this not being broadcast
Is this
live?
live for us? I don't think this is live.
Yes. Once she finished working at RTE, how many times do you want me to say that? What? Is it enjoyed that?
Never
You enjoyed
again.
that? She worked as a communications consultant for a number of sort of NGOs and government bodies, including, I would say, the highlight of those that I saw was she was the head of the EU presidency communications for the TSOC in 2013. So presumably that was when Ireland was
had the presidency for 6 months.
she was in charge of that. So
Just very good.
chugging around Brussels on her Massey Ferguson tractor. She's also, I think she still is, as far as I could tell, the chair of the Women on Air initiative, which is one of these things that tries to encourage more women to get into broadcasting in Ireland. So she seems to have done quite a lot of campaigning and things like that. But interestingly, she married a rock star, Mark. She married Barry Devlin, an Irish rock star. Have you heard of Barry Devlin?
I have heard of Barry Devlin, Russ, yeah.
He's the vocalist, bass player and frontman of the Irish Celtic rock band Horselips.
I've definitely heard the name, yeah. Wow, rock god.
And I listened to a bit of Horselips. They sound all right. They're kind of pretty solid 70s, 70s rock, sort of stuff you'd have on the old Grey Whistle Test sort of thing.
Yeah, oh, that's a good way.
But I was much more interested in the fact that he's also a screenwriter. And not only has he written episodes of The Darling Buds of May, but he wrote episodes of Ballykiss Angel, Mark. And remember who created Ballykiss Angel?
I do remember who that's our boy Kieran.
Kieran Prenderville. So he must be mates. I wonder, whether Kieran Prenderville is friends with Caroline Erskine. Could possibly be. Could be a little TW connection there.
They definitely must have met.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this segment, Mark.
Well, I mean, we talked a lot about Caroline there, and rightly. Oh, by the way, you have a picture of Caroline with Gabriel Byrne.
I forgot about that. Yes, yeah. I found this picture. I thought you might want to see what she looks like these days.
She's not aged bad.
No, and
she looks quite surly, but she looks fair play to her. I heard a great story about Gabriel Byrne this Christmas. He was one of the BBC's main programs on Christmas Day was like, what was it called, The Horse, the Fox, and the something or another. And it's another one of these kind of kids programs that the BBC have turned into an animated film. And the director, I think, who also kind of co-adapted it, for whatever reason, really wanted Gabriel Byrne to play a part, to do a voiceover. I think of the horse, and he sent him the script. And apparently, Gabriel Byrne, a bit like Bill Murray, is one of those people who just has a number, like a fax number, and like a number for an answering machine that you can leave a message on, and you kind of like send him the script, and you follow it up with a phone call. You explain what it is, and then you leave a number. And this guy was saying God. Like weeks passed, a couple of weeks passed, and almost to the point where like I'd forgotten that I'd done it, and I was kind of thinking about who should I get in, who should I do it, and he just like one day he got this phone call and someone left a message on it because it didn't recognize the number, left a message on it, and it was from the States, and it was Gabriel Byrne saying, all I need to say is I am the fucking horse. So he was in.
excellent.
Yeah. And you can imagine him saying it, can't you?
Yeah.
Much. That wasn't even an impression. I just, I just thought it was just a wonderful story about like a primetime BBC animated film for like families.
Yeah.
I am the fucking horse. Right, we've got Gabriel, everyone. He's in. Sorry, but do you know what? All this talking, we are not even touching upon the true majesty of this segment.
Yeah, it really.
Please, Russ, tell us.
It really kicks up a notch once. Our knight in shining armour, Michael Rodd, emerges from absolutely nowhere.
Yes, like a goddamn spaceman.
Well, his first is this sort of almost sort of Frank Spencer like
Yes.
danger maneuver where he leaps in to switch on Caroline's seed drill or something like that. Is what he's trying to do?
Yeah.
And he,
Actually, that was one thing I want to say. Is like Caroline, not just like just ums and ahs. I blame the script, which she may and may not have been involved in. She does a really bad. Sorry, we got to get back to the beginning, Russ. The quiet cab. Yeah. She says right at the beginning, when it was first introduced, all the controls were on the outside. Yeah. So this revolutionary idea of enclosing the driving area of a tractor, which obviously doesn't exist in any other motor vehicle whatsoever.
Yeah.
There's no existing plans you can just steal from. You're having to reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine Henry Ford sitting there frantically making notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when they first designed the quiet cab, they had all the controls on the outside, which is just mind-boggling.
How do you even reach a steering wheel?
And so then she says like, oh, but don't worry, the future's here. So then she says like, so if you wanted to change something on whatever the fuck it is I'm pulling behind me, because I'm not a farmer, I can't remember what it's called, you'd have to get out and manually do it. And that's when we cut to... we got to Rod leaping into frame, almost tripping over it, landing headfirst into what, to my mind, must be horrendously dangerous plant. And then you see him kind of fiddle with something, and she goes, "Oh, thank you, Michael Rod." Oh, he gives such a great thumbs up. It's like this is another episode where we have seen him white knight himself into a segment to help some kind of damsel in distress.
Do you think he's in? He thinks he's in there now. Do you think he?
Oh, yes, he is. Yeah, absolutely. Because as far as he's concerned, he's abroad. Yeah. There's no rules anymore. If he's married, his marital vows stop at the border. That's what I think. And of course, his wife never has to worry ever.
Yeah, let Michael have his fantasies.
Yeah, exactly. She must laugh at him all the time. He's so endearing as well. And I thought, oh, there we go. There's a really funny Rod cameo. Aren't we lucky? He's nailed it. And it is nothing. Nothing. Because later on, again, a bit like the earlier segment, the first half is Caroline. Like, she's given the headline and then she vanishes.
Yeah.
And Rod picks up the explanatory work at the end.
So, suddenly he's in the tractor now.
Yes.
He's spraying God knows what onto the fields. And then he emerges from the tractor and he's wearing a sort of green overalls.
Mint green overalls.
Which are far too big for him. They look
way too big.
They look like they've been semi-inflated. Or he's pregnant or something. They look really weird on him.
He's clearly, underneath the overalls, he is wearing some kind of box on his stomach, on his torso. He really is. Like, it kind of reminded me of, like, for some reason, the image that came into my head is at the end of Return of the Jedi, when Darth Vader takes off his helmet. He's got that little xylophone in his mouth. And for some reason, that is around Rod's torso. And he's had to... I can't explain it, because then I don't understand.
You know what I thought it might be? I was thinking it might be the in Total Recall.
Quato.
Yeah, I thought it was Quato from Total Recall.
Open your mind.
Just imagine him underneath the overalls for some reason. Yeah, so
that's a real small holding.
Yeah, and then he gives them. I think this episode generally has an absolutely excellent, compared to a lot of our episodes, this episode has an absolutely excellent record for everything in it making sense and also being something that actually we do have ended up with. Apart from this one thing that he says in this, which you pointed out in the notes, is the idea that if you're spraying dangerous chemicals, it's worse to be in a sealed cab because the chemicals, you're stuck in there with the chemicals, than it is to just be driving an open top tractor.
Yeah.
Because the chemicals will magically blow away, even though you're spraying chemicals all over yourself. It makes no sense.
I've already sworn too much in this episode, but it's also bullshit.
Yeah.
He basically says an open cab is safer because the wind blows the chemicals behind you. Now, there are several issues with this. One, tractors famously go up and down a field, north and south or east and west or whatever directions. Two, the wind does not blow consistently in the one direction. No. And if it did, at some point, you would now then be facing against the wind, so that it's blowing. I could not understand what he was on. Well, no, I did understand what he was on about. It was bullshit.
It's like saying the best thing to do if someone's trying to gas you is take your gas mask off to help the gas blow away from you, isn't it? That's essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, to take your gas mask off and go.
so weird.
Oh,
Such an
Rod.
odd thing to claim.
So he gets back in. He gets into this cab, which fair enough. It's not sealed, but it's definitely. Oh yeah, because that's his idea. His idea is that like, oh, it's fine if you're in your tweed suit in an open cab because the wind will blow the pesticides off your fabulous suit, and then you'll be fine. But because it's a closed cab, he has to wear this mint green overall. And then he puts on like the kind of spaceman's helmet like you'd get from a Kinder Surprise.
And at this point, I was thinking, is that a joke?
This is a
is
joke.
that a joke?
This is yeah. I mean, like, but it's at his expense. Like, it's the crew because it's just. I mean, like, it's comedically large. He puts this kind of plastic helmet with kind of upper torso, like a toreador jacket. It's like a one-piece thing.
It's kind of like the old style, Victorian style diving.
Yes,
helmet,
diving
but
helmet,
but a spaceman version of that kind of thing, isn't it?
And then there's this kind of massive plastic visor that because you and I have just seen Ant-Man reminds me of how bad MODOK looked. And the thing is, like, he then gets back in and then doesn't even shut it.
No.
And just repeatedly hits his head on the tractor.
I saw somebody talking about the Ant-Man film, and they said it's a really great film to watch if you like seeing people putting on and taking off helmets. Because everyone in that film is constantly putting on and taking off a helmet, and it's absolutely true. They are.
It's 100% true. That is half the script.
Yeah. So is this bit a joke, or is there a genuine suggestion that farmers ought to wear astronauts' helmets in their tractors? I genuinely don't know.
Let me ask a different question. Does Michael Rudd think it's a joke? Because I think the answer is no. I think he thinks he's out there saving lives. Because later on, we're going to see another farmer blast the countryside with pesticides. And he basically does not give a shit.
No.
And he most certainly would not wear a spaceman's helmet and mint green overalls. No, I don't know. The more I watched it, the more ridiculous it seemed. And the more kind of... It really stands out in this episode how stupid this one bit is.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And it really feels like they're taking the piss out of him. I can't quite put my finger on it more than that.
And also, it's only stupid once Michael Rudd turns up. The segment was absolutely fine when Caroline was doing it.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, if Raymond Baxter is in that outfit, you'd be going like, oh, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. Yeah. For the moment Rod turns up, it just becomes spectacular.
Well, anyway, right. So this tractor, Mark, obviously.
Oh, I forgot there's more. Sorry.
I'm sure everyone at home wants to know what tractor we've got.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is almost the platonic ideal of a tractor, isn't it? To me, this is if I picture a tractor in my head, it's a red Massey Ferguson is the tractor's tractor, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Although I looked up this particular model, this is the Massey Ferguson 595. Universally hated by farmers, Mark. Universally hated by farmers. I went on thefarmingforum.co.uk. It was on a list of the worst tractors ever.
Wow. Seems perfectly fine.
There was one thread where somebody said, I've seen a cheap Massey Ferguson 595, should I buy it? And all of the farmers weighed in and went, do not buy this tractor. This is one of the worst tractors ever made. All farmers hate it. There was one poster who went by the name Cowabunga, which I think is an excellent forum name for a farmer.
Yeah.
He almost filled an almost a whole page with closely packed type of all of the technical problems he'd had with his Massey Ferguson 595.
You make it sound like John Doe's notebooks.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But go on Auto Trader, and even though they discontinued these in 1982, still cost you about $5,000 to $7,000 for one. Tractors really do hold their prices, Mark.
I'm hugely impressed, but I suppose they're quite simple and quite sturdy things, aren't they?
I looked up why are they calling it a Q cab. Well, I called it quiet cab, but what's a Q thing? Like, is it a thing? Is it? It turns out that it's actually a legal thing. It's the agriculture brackets tractor cabs regulations 1974, Mark.
Oh.
And this is the law, Mark. Tractors are required to be fitted with safety cabs when driven by workers employed in agriculture, except where it is not practicable to do so, e.g. in hop gardens, hop yards, orchards and buildings. And they brought that law in basically to stop, because if a tractor rolls over, which it might do, because, it's got rough terrain, it would, an open top tractor would just squash the person driving it. So they made it a law that you had to put a cab on it to stop tractor drivers getting squashed. So it wasn't really anything to do with quietness or not gassing yourself. It was much more to do with not squashing your head. which is why they brought it in. But the government approves all of the cabs, and once they've approved the cab, they put a certificate symbol on it, and that symbol includes the letter Q, which is why they are called Q cabs.
They're Q cabs.
And the noise level inside a Q cab must not exceed 85 decibels. So there you go, Mark.
Whisper quiet.
Whisper quiet. And Massey Ferguson is still going. Their millionth tractor came off the production line in June 2022.
Gosh, that's recent.
People are still using ones from 1981. That's why.
Which I find incredible, but then it makes sense because, I will say this. We have wrung more out of this segment than I ever thought we ever would. So.
Yeah, actually, we haven't been talking much longer in this segment than any of the others, haven't we?
Yeah, 100%. I just looked and I was thinking, holy shit, there's 3 more segments to talk about.
And here's another cause for concern, the British breakfast. Traditionally, we've obtained almost half our bacon from Denmark, but tastes change, and we're now eating far less bacon than we were 5 years ago.
For farmers like Steen Sjöland and his father, that trend has meant rethinking the pig. Until 2 years ago, almost 5 out of every 10 pigs were destined to end up as bacon for the United Kingdom. Only 2 little piggies stayed at home, and the rest went to other European countries and America. Over the years, the Danes have even managed to breed a pig with 2 extra vertebrae in its spine to give more of that best-back bacon that we all apparently prefer. It took time, patience and money to breed out the congenital defects such as weak legs and low resistance to disease, and breed in an ability to bear more piglets, to grow fast and to produce high-quality meat. There's no doubting the result. These long pigs, or landrace as they're called, are thoroughbred bacon factories. But while we are eating considerably less Danish bacon, the Germans are saying they'll take as much pork, ham and canned meat as the Danes care to sell them. But the landrace pig, though great for bacon, is not so good for producing meat for canning. What was needed was a way of transferring the thick-set, heavier qualities of this, the large white Yorkshire breed, into the Danish landrace stock. Mr. Sjöland is one of the first farmers in Denmark to take part in the quest to breed this new ham pig. The piglet on the right is purebred landrace stock. Although at this age only a specialist can spot the differences, this piglet, with the slightly larger ears, is one of the new pigs. He's 1/4 Yorkshire and 3/4 landrace, and he and his brothers and sisters are the VIPs, very important pigs, of this experiment. These piglets were born by caesarean operation 3 weeks ago in a totally germ-free environment. They were reared for 2 weeks in sterile surroundings and then brought to this special super clean farm to complete their 6 months development. Because of their greatly accelerated early growth, these specific pathogen-free pigs will continue to put on weight faster than the normal landrace breed. And when they're fully grown, the sows are able to produce over 10% more piglets.
Favourite pork product, Mark?
Favourite pork product, Mark? Wow, what a great question, Russ. I hope it's on brand for the episode, but I'm very fond of white pudding, which is a pork-based product.
You introduced me to white pudding, and I must say,
yes,
it is delicious.
It is a delicious thing. I do like bacon, but I do think bacon is overhyped. And actually, I'll tell you what, I rediscovered pork chops over the last 5 years. I grew up with them and perhaps didn't love them as much as I could have done. As an adult, I would never buy them. I'd always buy a lamb chop, which is, I think, the king of the chops. And then actually Josie started buying them. And it's partly the way she cooks them, and partly actually because I think they probably are quite tasty. It was always one of those things on The Simpsons. I never understood why Homer was so obsessed with pork chops when lamb chops were available to
Americans don't eat lamb. That's the thing.
No, they don't eat lamb. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, but I'll stick with white pudding just because I think it's appropriate for the episode. And also, to be frank, I have some in the freezer, so I've got some. I've got some in the house, Russ. Well, what about you?
I think it's the Cumberland sausage, I'm going to say.
Oh, there's something visually wonderful, isn't it, about that curl?
They are the animal that produces
the widest variety.
The widest variety of meats, certainly. Yeah. I wonder why that is.
Even down. I mean, is there much better than crackling? Maybe that might be my favorite pork product. Is the delicious Poor crackling.
Getting hungry now.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, not recently, but like I've had it a few times. But like because we were in the States in September, I had some beef ribs, which were obviously as delicious as you'd expect.
Yeah.
You don't get beef bacon. You
No.
don't get beef crackling, do you?
No, I mean, for a long time, I was pushing for duck scratchings.
Well, you and I were always pushing for lamb scratch.
Yes, lamb scratchings, and I've still never seen lamb scratchings.
Nah,
I mentioned duck scratchings to a lot of people, and then my
that sounds incredible.
cousin's husband, he sent me a link to a company producing what they call quackling, which is indeed duck scratchings.
Your husband has introduced you to quackling.
I've still not tried it yet, actually.
Oh my god, that sounds incredible.
Yeah.
Just for the name alone, I want to have
Well,
some.
it's almost like something they've reverse engineered from the name, isn't it?
Yes, it does.
But yeah, no, lamb scratchings that's got to be the way to go, isn't it? Lamb fat is so delicious.
Oh, like to me, like a lamb chop is almost a fat enabler. Luckily, I enjoy the meat, but oh man, no. I mean, I think in general, like the pig, fair play. I don't know what to say, whether to congratulate pigs or whether they would look at me like you insensitive idiot. But they have managed to develop themselves in a way that means that there's a wide spectrum of delicious meats that they produce.
I think they're not doing themselves any favours.
By being so delicious.
Getting back to this segment.
That's it, Homer. That's the spirit.
They're not doing themselves many favours, but as demonstrated by this segment, which I had no idea was the case, they could just grow extra vertebrae.
Yes, mad. No, don't make yourself more meaty and delicious.
They can just grow an extra 2 vertebrae, so they've got 2 more ribs and all that.
I've never heard of that. I mean, the closest story I can think of that is Prince removed ribs so that he gave himself a blowjob.
Yeah.
And here, pigs apparently are being husbanded in such a way that they add.
That was a weird one. That
but actually, but not for the ribs, but for the back bacon.
that rumor about Prince that went around.
Yes,
I remember that for some, because those rumours, they update themselves according to the period. So I remember in the 90s,
Really?
In the 90s, it stopped being Prince and was Marilyn Manson instead.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No, wow. I mean, I believe it for both of them. So whoever picked them did a good job.
Yeah. Do you know obviously there's the famous Mark Armand rumour?
Yes, of course.
Do you know in America, because they don't know who Mark Armand is, they say it's Rod Stewart, which makes no sense at all because
that makes
Rod Stewart is a stridently heterosexual man.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Anyway, this segment, we have these occasionally, especially the 70s episodes, farming segment, where the welfare or morality around the animals is not even really a consideration.
It is
barely
not
a consideration.
It's not an issue.
They are looked
absolutely.
at purely as products.
Yeah.
We've got these pigs in front of us, and some of them don't look happy, some of them look more happy than others, and all of this. That is not a concern to us. This is purely industry, technology, science. How the pig feels about any of this is absolutely not our concern at all. It is purely, what can we get out of these animals, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're lucky they're alive.
yeah. I think this is our first cruel farmers as well, isn't it? They've bred these pigs with the extra vertebrae. Unfortunately, it turns out that gives them gammy legs or something like that, and then they have to breed that out of them as well. Is that what's going on? Is that what he says?
Yeah. It's not funny enough. It's funny how long it's taken to get into the episode for there to be something that is, I'd say, overtly cruel. It's not the cruelest thing we will learn in this episode. That's still to come. But with this one, you're absolutely right. Yeah, they accidentally produced a generation of pigs who were lame. You were talking about it earlier. We cut to an image of a very plaintive-looking pig, sitting down on its haunches, pleading with the camera. One assumes that's not one of the lame pigs. I can't imagine the Danish would be very happy having those on TV. So it just happens to be.
Do you think a member of the crew just cracked it across the kneecaps to make it?
Oh my god! I didn't,
get that
but now
shot.
I do. Thanks to the unique way the BBC is funded, these pigs have been kneecapped for our entertainment.
Yeah, well, actually, sorry. What we should have mentioned is the Actually, the segment opens with Raymond doing something that we've only ever seen Raymond do, and that's broadcasting through a window.
Through a window, absolutely. I mean, only episodes of Play School and when Raymond's on OB, he's tucking into a delicious, classic, full English / full Irish breakfast. And yeah, he's been recorded the other side of the kitchen window.
He says that bacon consumption has gone down in recent years. I don't know what would be the cause of that. Maybe people feeling a bit healthier in the 70s, maybe? I don't know.
Maybe 4 people decided to be vegetarian and that was enough to... I doubt it was that cataclysmic a drop. That segues into this discussion of Danish bacon and Danish pig farmery. And then we cut to a Danish pig farmer who, to my mind, Russ, and again, obviously the irony of having retired permanently, the Stanley Kubrick reference... He looks like a goddamn Drew. He is in white overalls with the walking stick.
He looks exactly like a... Oh, Mark.
Yeah.
So that's 2 weeks in a row we've had a Stanley Kubrick reference.
Two weeks in a row we've had a Stanley Kubrick reference.
Literally directly after we retired the...
Yeah, permanently. I mean, as I said, I've lifted it into the loft like one of those retired numbers in American sports. It can't come down, Russ.
Oh, do you think that's it? Now we've retired it. We're gonna have a reference every week again.
Oh yeah, 100%. Every single goddamn week. He's just missing the codpiece, but he's got the walking stick. He's just hammering away at the cows. Yeah.
Oh.
And of course, there's loads of milk later on, but not in this segment.
Maybe he's the one that cracked the old pig across the kneecaps. Actually.
Yeah, it wasn't the BBC. But they
they
politely requested. Yeah, it is, yeah.
Wooly is doing a VO again, and he reckons that the Germans absolutely cannot get enough of this Danish pork.
Well, it's like we've slightly gone off it, and the Germans are chuffed to bits that finally they can get in there and steal all that sweet, sweet bacon that we've turned our nose
Presumably,
about,
the Germans need a lot of protein and energy to keep them working those double jobs that they're all doing.
Yeah.
They do have a slap up porky breakfast to get before you get down the VW factory. You know, pork for lunch and then off to the farm.
Off to the farm with you. Yeah, one assumes. Well, you and I have been to Germany many times, and they do seem to have a basically potato dough / pork based diet.
Yeah. I have to say, German food. German food. I mean, obviously, I enjoy the German kebabs, but the actual, like, if you go to Munich or something like that, you get the classic German food there. I'm never a fan of the way stuff is described on the menu because it's always pork knuckle.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of eating a knuckle, even though actually it's a big joint of meat. And also, they always refer to it as flesh. Rather than meat, they say flesh, and there's something about the word. Something about the word flesh is just off-putting. Yeah. But apparently the Germans absolutely love. They love bacon and they love canned meat as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what we get into because this happens in a later segment where they start kind of basically criticizing specific breeds of pigs for their inability to do something. So the land-raised pig apparently is fantastic for bacon, but is really rotten when it comes to canned meat. And I remember it's just like, I kind of felt offended on behalf of the pig. It's like, that's not really a criticism. So it's really good at producing quality meat, but it's really bad at producing, how does one put this? More relaxed quality meat. And then they start talking about long pigs.
Yes.
Which you are absolutely correct in your notes, because I forgot to write it down. That is a slang term for...
Human flesh.
Yeah. For cannibalism. Yeah. Humans are long pigs.
Yeah.
So the apocryphal story goes. It's true.
I looked up to double check, and it was Pacific Islander cannibals back in the day would refer to humans as long pigs. And Willy just throws it in here, no questions asked. But of course, apparently, humans do mostly the closest thing they taste of is pork, isn't it? Isn't that
famously? Yeah.
So maybe it's a deliberate little reference there that Willy's throwing in for the people at home.
But eventually, they kind of land on the fact that they've developed these new VI pigs, these longer pigs, and then they criticize those pigs for having the audacity of dying in shitty farms. They're susceptible to diseases, apparently. So dirty farms, they will die. And I remember thinking, like, again, that's not really... Tonally, it's like, if you're going to fuck about with animals, you can't criticize the animals for...
being born that way.
Yeah. Lady Gaga would be furious with them.
It just seems like if you've bred a pig and you can't get it dirty, that suggests that nature doesn't want you to breed that pig.
Or that your farm is absolutely horrendous.
It's like breeding a monkey that's scared of heights or something like that, isn't it? It's like,
oh yeah.
it's, you know, it's raison d'etre is to get all dirty and get all filthy. I don't think Mother Nature wants you to breed.
That's on you, isn't it, farmer?
So yeah, well, I mean, so I guess the idea here is just the idea of super delicious pigs. Is it like the idea that selective breeding is going to get some super delicious pigs? Is that the development?
Yeah, basically, I think it is.
Yeah,
like breeding pigs to be exactly what the market requires.
And hopefully, at some point, they'll be able to breed out the fact that they have to keep them in sterile conditions, I guess.
And the fact that, as you rightly pointed out, as the pig lover you are, they seem to have accidentally bred the ugliest looking pigs.
Yeah. The vet, well, not the vet, whatever he is, the scientist or...
Yeah, scientist, I assume.
He picks one up.
Yeah.
And the little piglets are normally quite cute. This one...
They are normally
This
quite
one
cute.
has got an absolutely hideous face. It's an absolute
Plug
monstrosity.
ugly.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's squealing away in his hand. The sooner he throws that one into a mincer, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Or just puts them on a normal farm.
Yeah. Stick an apple in its mouth.
It's done.
Bacon. Who do you reckon invented bacon, Mark?
When it seems the Romans?
Chinese.
Chinese invented bacon.
1500 BC, the Chinese invented bacon.
Oh, wow.
The US produces around 1 billion tons of bacon per year.
Do you know, Josie tells a great story about going to farmer's market in the States. Because obviously in America they have streaky bacon. Or they don't. They just have streaky bacon. That's it. Streaky bacon, and it's cooked till it's crisp.
I would go so far as to say that American bacon is so wildly different to British bacon that it's essentially a different product, isn't it? Is it?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, like you go there, it's like, it's not bacon anymore. Don't get me wrong, when I have my stack of pancakes and bacon, I want that American bacon. But other than that, never. And like she went to this mum and she was discussing, it's like, she start explaining back bacon. So like your man goes off and like next week he goes like, I see what you're talking about. Like in Britain, like you cut from a completely different part. So I think he gave her some, but it was also like, wow, it's really good.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those weird things of like, here we were talking about this animal that provides, an incredible array of different meats. But even within that wide spectrum, different countries focus on different things. And like, if there isn't a market there, it's not provided for. So their bacon is completely different.
Right.
I mean, especially when you buy bacon in the States and you get these gigantic packs of kind of, these kind of weird, flat, thin packs with like 30 bits of streaky bacon in, it's very odd.
Yeah, my understanding is that the American is from the belly and ours is from the back.
Yes.
So presumably that means if you were, stuck on a desert island with an American and you had,
You'd be
you
fine.
had a pig,
Yeah.
you would both be able to satisfy your personal bacon needs without impinging on each other at all.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there might be a little bit of cross-cultural learning. You might go, yeah, but yeah, no. I think in general you'd be fine. You'd be gnawing in different parts of the animal, wouldn't you?
The Danish are still the champion bacon eaters, though, Mark. Per capita, the Danish still eat more bacon than anybody else. Something I thought was very interesting and odd about the Netherlands is basically southern Denmark, isn't it, really?
Mm-hmm.
Almost impossible to buy any decent bacon in the Netherlands. Go to
Really?
the supermarket, they've got some really crappy, incredibly thin and quite pricey bacon, and that's it. If I want any sort of decent bacon of any kind, I have to go to the expat British shop. You can't get... Dutch people don't really eat proper bacon for some reason.
Oh, that's astonishing.
Which is amazing, considering they just have to pop over up the road for it, over to Denmark.
But then if you told me that the Danish don't eat bacon because they sell it all and export it, I wouldn't have been shocked. Yeah, I am shocked that the Dutch do because it's just there. It's just waiting to be eaten.
Exactly. Just pluck it. Just pluck it.
Wow. So what do they have instead of bacon then? What's their kind of go-to breakfast meat?
Well, they have chocolate sprinkles on bread, don't they? For breakfast.
Oh, that's what it is, of course. Yes, absolutely.
The
To be fair,
lunatics.
you're not wrong. Yeah.
Landrace. I wonder what landrace meant. Landrace is originally a German word. Anything can be a landrace. You can have a landrace plant. You can have a landrace any animal, and it's what something has been specifically bred to suit that country.
Oh, okay.
So the Danish landrace pig has been specifically bred to suit the Danish environment and desires.
The terroir.
You can also get a British landrace pig, a Dutch landrace pig, and you can get a landrace pig for any country in the world. So that's what.
So it's kind of location specific.
Yes, yeah, and each one is slightly different. Once again, this is quite an interesting segment in that it is right about this time that the Danish decided that the Danish landrace wasn't productive enough for their needs because they wanted to farm them more intensively. And as they say in this segment, they wanted to try and find a better one, a better pig, because it was going up against, there's another pig called the Large White, which was originally a British one called the Yorkshire. And that is pretty much the world's top pig. Like most people use the Large White. And the Danish were trying to find their own version. So they made a crossbreed of the landrace and the Large White, and they came up with the Dan-bred hybrid, Mark. And the Dan-bred hybrid, which sounds like some sort of high-tech car, you go on the website, there's a website for the Dan-bred hybrid, and it's like a really high-tech website.
Oh, okay.
But it's a website for a pig. You can basically buy, I think some company called Dan-bred essentially owns the genetic rights to this pig. That's what I could sort of ascertain from this website. And they're basically, this website's just trying to sell you the concept of the Dan-bred hybrid pig. This is their blurb, Mark.
Okay.
Dan-bred hybrid has an even temper and excellent mothering abilities, as well as a good longevity. The breed produces large viable litters of robust pigs, which grow fast and have a high feed efficiency, all the way to slaughter. And when crossed with the Dan-bred Duroc, which is their other product, the offspring will inherit all these traits as well as an excellent meat quality. The Dan-bred hybrid is the most prolific hybrid for production of optimal finishers. Dan-bred hybrid is a first cross between Dan-bred Landrace and Dan-bred Yorkshire. It is the optimal dam line, which ensures high efficiency in the production by combining the best traits.
Yum.
I mean, I couldn't see a price list, Mark, but I'm absolutely desperate to go out and buy myself a Dan-bred hybrid now.
What's on Auto Trader?
It's weird to have such a high, sort of like a high-tech efficiency approach to a living creature, isn't it? I find it quite odd.
Yes, and that's kind of why I don't think farming and agriculture made it through to like the second half of Tomorrow's World Time, because it's morally challenging, isn't it? I think to a lot of people, not everyone. And farmers do really important work, and frankly I'm enough of a hypocrite that I will eat all this delicious stuff without really trying too hard to think about where it came from. But the flip side of that compact is that don't tell me where it came from. But then I'm also not shocked that there's like a really expensive website selling how great these animals are, because it's a business. And you have a year to produce whatever product it is that you're going to produce, and if you get it wrong, you're in trouble. So don't get it wrong. Again, though, yum.
Never seen the point in applesauce, though. I'm not sure.
Oh, I can't stand it. No, I just like the meat.
This Dutch butter cost me 55 pence a pound in the supermarket, which is a little strange because the Dutch farmer who produced it was actually paid 83 pence a pound for it. Now, that apparent madness is due largely to what we know as the green pound. The Common Market Agricultural Policy decrees that farm subsidies and grants be paid in a common currency, and they've had to invent one. They call it units of account. 4 Deutschmarks, just under 5 French francs, were the equivalent of 1 unit of account. Now, when we were negotiating to join the common market, our pound sterling was worth 2.4 units of account. But almost straight away, we allowed our pound to float, and its value fell to around 2 units of account. But Brussels couldn't live with a pound whose value was going up and down every day. So they settled the value artificially. They produced the green pound. And they decreed that its value was 2.16 units of account. Now, since those days, we know what's happened to the real pound. Its value has tumbled. Today, it stands at just over 1.2 units of account. But the green pound has fared somewhat better. Today, despite slight devaluations, it stands at 1.76 units. This is the unit of currency we use to pay all our imported food bills with. And it means that the common market has got to chip in every time we spend a pound sterling to the tune of 42 pence to make up the difference between the value of the two currencies. This is costing the common market £1,750,000 every day, and there's not a thing they can do about it. We are playing strictly to the rules. Before there can be any devaluation of the green pound, we in Britain would have to give our agreement, and at the moment, it suits us not to give that agreement. Mind you, such an arrangement does make it easier for the continental farmer, too, to get rid of his produce.
Up yours, Delors. I think this is, this is a funny little one, isn't it? This is not really Tomorrow's World. This is just Michael Rodds sticking two fingers up at the common market, isn't it?
Basically, yes, and kind of and fundamentally misconstruing what exactly is happening.
Well, he just seems to think we've struck a cunning ruse.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. It's written all over his face, and there's nothing they can do about it. Yeah, it's like, yeah, but we're paying as well. Like, you know,
it's no they.
Do you understand that? Yeah, it's like, it's not. There is no. Yeah, exactly. Like, we're all paying for this. Like, it's, you know, no one really, and also that probably means that our farmers are losing out in some way. You know,
yeah.
Pretty circular, Rod. It's a kind of it's a closed, hermetically sealed circle. That's the issue here. I'd never heard of the green pound before. This idea, this kind of currency unit, because it was interesting because, like, and I get it. Like, if you're gonna before the idea of like having a common market, if you are gonna have a kind of a common agricultural policy, you need a way of divining cost and then kind of retroactively kind of working out what that is worth. So, you know, you have this farm unit and it's worth, what was it? Was it 4 Deutschmarks or 5 francs or something like that?
Yeah.
And it's sort of locked. And then the British joined and they didn't sign up to this unit system because, of course, they just wanted to spend pounds, but obviously currency fluctuates. And that just basically pissed people off because it kind of undermines the system entirely. If you have a very large economy saying like, we're not going to play by the rules and blah, blah, blah. So they came up with this idea of the green pound, which still fluctuated, but fluctuated less, which is a really classic kind of Brussels fudge to kind of deal with British intransigence. Yeah. I'm not quite sure people who voted leave genuinely appreciated just how much fudging happened.
How much they bent over backwards to accommodate us being twats.
Yeah, absolute twats. Yeah. And there's nothing they can do about it.
There must be so many people in the EU, like in high ups, absolutely delighted they don't have to deal with us anymore.
Oh, absolutely. I know there are a lot of countries who actually really enjoyed hiding behind Britain because they had the same problems. Yeah. And I'm sure they feel like they've lost a hugely powerful ally. But I think in general, unfortunately, I don't think the UK government has missed all that much.
Yeah, no, I'd never heard of the green pounds before. I was thinking maybe it's a bit like petrodollars in that it's a thing that's used specifically for one industry, and it's kind of like a currency, but it's like not a real currency, a side currency sort of thing.
Yes.
But it turns out that during this period, the green pound was a big hot button issue because it might surprise you, Mark. It might shock you even. But Michael Rodd has completely missed the problem. Yeah. So because the pound was devalued and the green pound was worth more, it did indeed, as Michael says, mean that we could get incredibly cheap Dutch butter. But the corollary, that's the word, isn't it? Corollary?
That'll do.
Of that is that it was absolutely destroying British farming.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. It's like, yeah, that meant that our farmers were losing out. They weren't competitive.
It absolutely ruined our farm. So all of our farmers...
And there's nothing they can do about it.
All of our farmers were absolutely tearing their hair out because this was absolutely... There were certain points in the 1970s where the green pound was worth 30% more than the actual pound. So this meant that food prices and British farmers' incomes were being destroyed. So there was like big arguments in the government, and in the end, I think Callaghan managed to devalue the green pound by 5% in order to try to do this. But during the 1979 general election, it was one of the big issues that they were that was in like the manifestos. Yes. So the manifestos are all talking about they needed to devalue the green pounds. Like this needs to be done because, it's causing big trouble. So luckily for Britain, 1993, they brought in a new system where it automatically adjusted according to the exchange rates. So that got rid of this problem of the green pound not being in line with the actual pound. And then once the euro was introduced, they just didn't need it anymore. They just pegged it to the euro, and so it was gone. So yeah, I mean, and that's it.
I suppose what I was thinking was like, if we're buying Dutch butter for 55p, when it actually costs 85p, and it's been topped up by the EEC to the tune of that missing 30 pence or whatever, which is basically what he's implying, and how we're kind of getting away with it. That means that, as you say, the flip side of that is like British farmers are selling butter for 55p when it in fact costs 85p. And who's topping them up, Rod? It's just like it's like that's the thing, is like it's a circle. Like there is no, it's like energy. You can't make it or break, or destroy it. It just transfers, which means that somebody's losing out somewhere. It's not a magic system. Do you know what? I am more shocked at that he didn't get it right than I should be, because now, once he said, would you be surprised if I told you he was wrong? It's like, no, I wouldn't. Why did I ever think he was right? Probably because I'd never heard of it. So I suppose I trusted him.
I ran his figures through the inflation calculator. Astonishingly, so his butter, his Dutch butter, he said was 55 pence a pound paying for that. Now, I bought some Dutch butter 2 days ago, Mark, and it cost me €2.69 for 250 grams.
Yep.
And so obviously I punched that through the relative weights and inflation machines. And it turns out that that's almost exactly the same price. So Dutch butter is still the same price as it was in 1976.
That's very good to hear.
Yeah. But I mean, this isn't Tomorrow's World segment. What is this? Money program? I don't know.
Well, no, because the money program would not have fucked up like that, would it? No, this is a That's Life thing, isn't it? And actually, because one of the reasons I thought was like, I'm just looking at the notes here, and you say, note the they. Even though the common market includes us, which is such a... I mean, with hindsight, it's such a pernicious trope. That is
the fundamental thing behind Brexit, isn't it? The fact that the European Union is they rather than us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it started from day one. Either they're getting something over on us, or we're secretly getting something over them, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's like, Jesus Christ, it's a fucking partnership. And actually, funny enough, because here we are talking about Ireland. It's like, Ireland was a grossly impoverished country in the 70s and 80s. And when I was growing up, most of the infrastructure projects that I saw, that you'd see the big signs for, were in part or perhaps even entirely funded by the European Union. And it was one of those things where I'm sure there were articles in some British tabloids about, like, look, we're sending money to Brussels, and what they're doing is they're paying for stuff in Ireland. Not even here. We're not getting it. They're paying for stuff in Ireland. And again, that completely misconstrued the idea, which is that the European Union, of the EEC at the time, understood that if you make somewhere like Ireland rich, at some point it contributes more than it takes, and God knows it'll then start buying your damn stupid shit. Yeah. And now Ireland is actually far richer than the United Kingdom, in terms of GDP, because it was given that leg up, and it is a net contributor to the European Union, and it is the model for what you do in the East. You elevate these places, and you create new markets, and you create people who have money to spend on stuff, either your stuff or stuff to help other... I don't know. Yeah. It hurts my head thinking about it. And I don't even like talking about Brexit and stuff like that. Because I actually understood why people voted leave. I really did. I understood the issues that they were complaining about. But I feel like a lot of Leave voters were completely misled. Not by the campaign. By the time the referendum came around, the damage was done 20, 30 years ago by people like Michael Rodd saying they.
Yeah. Should we pin Brexit on Michael Rodd?
Yes, Russell. No, I feel like he might be in the second row of people to blame.
Do you think in his personal life he's a Eurosceptic, or was he a Eurosceptic?
I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't a Eurosceptic. I actually think he probably did like the idea of...
I suppose he had been to a lot of European countries, isn't he, in his role?
Yeah, I still remember my pride in Michael Rodd when we watched the Netherlands special, and he talked about... Like, he reflected on how progressive it was as a society, and how you got that sense of a society deciding it wanted to be better, and it wanted to help people who couldn't help themselves, and actually that there was something we could learn. I was very struck by that. I would imagine he voted Remain, and I would suggest that does not mean that he isn't like a Britain First kind of person, where it's like, but we still got to make sure we got to get our bag, because they're not mutually exclusive. God, we're talking about Brexit a lot. And the thing is, like, there's probably people listening to this who think we're fucking idiots, but but whatever. History will prove us right. Says the Irishman and the man living in Holland. But even the other day when Rishi was in Northern Ireland and rightly pointing out how actually Northern Ireland is in such a powerful position, and he was describing this incredible economy.
I'm amazed nobody said to him, hang on a minute.
You're describing
don't you think you're gonna,
the entirety of the UK 3 years
don't you think
ago.
you're looking like a bit of an idiot saying this?
Yeah.
Even though it's
I
true.
know. It's like, why can't we all have that?
Getting rid of things, of course, often presents farmers with problems in other directions.
1976 was the year of the aphid. Green fly, black fly, white fly, all over Britain they were the scourge of suburban rose gardens and agricultural acres. Take the sugar beet crop, for instance. On sugar beet, the aphid Mysis persicae leaves a telltale mark. It not only eats it away, but worse, spreads a virus known as virus yellows. British beet farmers supply a third of all the sugar we use. The government wants to push that even higher and so cut sugarcane imports. But aphid-carried virus is a threat to farmer and economist alike. The immediate symptom is the jaundiced leaf, like the one on the left. Beneath it, the sugar-bearing root shrinks to half its healthy size. The aphids survive through strength in numbers. Just one of these tiny creatures is enough to turn a beet field into a disaster area. But this 40-foot pipe is turning the fight the farmer's way. It's a suction trap. A powerful pump sucks the air down the tube, taking any flying insects with it. Every day the catch is brought in. A soggy mess of flies, wasps, and aphids. There are 21 traps, including one in Denmark and one in Holland. The marauding aphid is no respecter of boundaries. During its spring migration, it crosses the Channel or North Sea at will, swept along by prevailing winds. It's an international enemy. Collections from all traps are sent off to the Rothamsted Experimental Station in Hertfordshire, and it's here that the laborious nitpicking work really begins. First, the aphids are separated from all other insects. Then, under the microscope, the tiny pests are divided into species and counted. In Britain, there are over 200 aphid types, 30 of them dangerous. This is Mysis persicae, the sugar beet aphid. A weekly bulletin is sent from Rothamsted giving counts for all aphids. In sugar beet country, they're compared with local surveys.
We've got the warning card this morning. It says that green aphids are reinfesting and colonising previously treated sugar beet fields.
We did ours about 10 days ago.
I hate insects, Russ. I absolutely hate insects.
Favourite insect, Mark?
Dead ones, all of them. Wipe them out. What is my favourite insect?
Why do you hate
What a great
insects? What's
question.
wrong with insects?
No, it's one of those. It's just like it's for me. It's nightmare fuel. Like little tiny things, just like.
But they're everywhere.
I suppose,
they're everywhere.
Yeah, that's the fucking point, Russ.
Surely that must be really annoying.
Yeah.
If I was going to have a phobia, I'd make sure it was something that I didn't have to see all the time.
Yeah, great. Oh shit! I didn't realise I could choose. I think it's like I'm fully aware of the biomass of insects, and that does not help. I hate them. I truly hate them. But I know well enough that they're really important. So all I can do is make sure that my personal house can be like their insect Passchendaele, but outside that they can do whatever they want.
Although to be fair, aphids. Absolute bastards.
Well, I don't think anyone likes them, do they?
No,
except like ladybirds or something like that.
Well, yeah, ladybirds like to tuck into a delicious aphid supper. But no, they're incredible. They're one of the worst insect pests known to man, even these days. They're pretty hard to get rid of. They're very hardy. Insect sprays aren't particularly effective against them, and they can reproduce asexually. So.
Oh, that's rude.
Yeah, exactly. So they can just pop out a few extra kids whenever they feel like it, Mark.
Man.
Absolute reverse of the prize cow. Oh, imagine if cows could reproduce asexually. That'd be useful, wouldn't it? Imagine how many steaks you could have then.
Well, I mean, the same number of steaks, just without
having to pay for those embryos.
That's the thing, yeah. All the more reason then, all the more reason that, to me, it is very odd that the scourge of Britain, scourge of Britain's attempt to be sugar independent, are introduced with like a rock solo, like they're fucking heroes.
Well, did you recognise this song, Mark?
No, I really didn't. No, and actually, I did try to Shazam it, and nothing came up. So I'm hugely impressed that you did.
Well, my Shazam worked. The Google Shazam is better than the actual Shazam.
No, I don't use the Google Shazam.
I've discovered.
So
I've done. There's been a couple of
because you've managed to capture stuff that I've not.
There's been a couple of times I've noticed. Did this with somebody at work the other day as well. They tried to use actual Shazam on a song that was playing, and nothing came up. I got out Google Shazam, and it immediately worked. The other good thing about Google Shazam is you can hum to it. So if there's a song, if you hum it,
yeah.
and it's a decent enough version of it.
So should I stop dialing 2580?
Yeah, I would if I were you. If you hum a decent version of a tune, it will try and guess that as well, which I think is amazing.
That's mind blowing because there's definitely times that I've tried to hum something and it has got it. Like I could not get Lieutenant Pigeon out of my head for months, and I think my Shazam actually did it, which is all the more frustrating than when it doesn't get songs that are actually real songs that are being played on Tomorrow's World.
This is our only actual piece of music, piece of actual music.
Yes, it is,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is Steve Hillage, and it's All Too Much, which is a cover of a Beatles song from Yellow Submarine, which I have to say I didn't realise, but I listened to it. It's actually a very nice song, and actually the Steve Hillage version is considered by a lot of people to be superior to the Beatles version.
Oh wow,
it's probably quite unusual, but it's written by George Harrison. It was about him taking acid in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, overloading his senses, which hence it's all too much. But Steve Hillage, actually pretty decent career. He's one of those sort of experimental prog rocky type people. So his bands were called Uriel, Khan, Gong. He also contributed to a band called Egg. But then in the late 80s, early 90s, he started a electronic duo called System 7, who I have heard of. System 7 were one of those classic, there's that classic dance act where it's two blokes on desks next to each other. He was one of those ones, and he was one of the sort of pioneers of that idea, of that playing live two blokes on the desk thing. And he's friends with Michael Eavis because of his 70s rock background. He was the person that Michael Eavis asked in 1995 to set up the first dance arena at Glastonbury. Yeah.
Wow.
So he invented the whole dance area at Glastonbury. So I thought, that's interesting, because that's a really really big part of Glastonbury these days. Yeah. So System 7 are big in Japan as well, Mark. That's it was good for a band.
Big in Japan tonight.
But I think Steve Hillage's biggest achievement, if you ask me, is that he played on William Shatner's cover version of Elton John's Rocket Man.
Wow. Okay, I mean, that's not bad.
Which is an astonishing piece of work.
Yeah, a tour de force, I would argue.
I think the reason they're playing it is this song was released this year. So the Steve Hillage version of this song was released in 1976.
In their mind. Okay, all right. So it's been on the radio.
And the song is called It's All Too Much. So maybe they're saying that there's too many aphids. Is that the idea?
Well, I would agree with that.
Yeah. I was a bit dubious. I wasn't dubious, but I was thinking this seems like something that wouldn't have lasted, or this seems like... So, I mean, basically, there's a load of suction pipes.
Yes.
All around the country, and also in Denmark and the Netherlands. And they suck insects out of the air, and then they get sent to an office.
Can I read what I wrote? It's a scheme of having giant vacuum cleaners sucking flies out of the sky to produce an entirely postal-based warning system.
Yeah.
And the reason I wanted to read it is, like, I actually couldn't sum it up in less words. Because it is so convoluted. And it's interesting because, like, 2 episodes ago, we saw the system of tracking ocean pollution through mussels. And that was one of those things where you see and think, like, oh, that's a really clever idea of using a resource to track something that's very difficult to track. Sorry, I couldn't think of a better word. Like
monitor?
Ocean pollution. Monitor, thank you. Yeah, it's a very simple way, and I think it did a job for a while until obviously you create something different. This is so fucking stupid. Like your way of measuring how many aphids there are is to suck them out of the sky, send them off to some other research station where they will manually count them.
Yeah.
And then a week later, you'll get some kind of telegram with a yellow border that someone who thinks they're important will read like they're reading a D notice from the MOD. It's the worst kind of... I mean, it's not responsive. It's not... Like, I was genuinely thinking, like, if they decided to set up a network of tall vacuum cleaners just to suck the aphids out the sky, I think that would be more effective than what I think they're trying to do. And then they have the audacity to slag off other countries for thinking this is a stupid idea.
Well, I would have agreed with you there, Mark.
Oh, shut up. Are you saying this has made it through to the future? No.
If it weren't for the fact that it's been a massive success and it's still going.
No! God damn. I'm mind blown.
The UK Aphid Monitoring Network, which is found at insectsurvey.com, still managed by the Rothamsted Insect Survey, and they still have a network of giant, 12.5 metre suction pipes all around the country. They have 16 of them around the country.
Oh, that's gone down.
They run from April to June, which is aphid season, and each suction pipe represents a radius of 80 kilometres, they reckon, because that's how far the aphids fly, I guess. And you can sign up to it, you can sign up for aphid alerts, and it's a free weekly summary, and it'll tell you whether you've got those yellows virus aphids or peach potato aphids in your area. You get a text every Saturday morning containing aphid data from your nominated suction trap. They even offer pre-season aphid forecasts. Yeah, so it really is, you know, top of the shop, high-tech aphid monitoring systems,
Wow.
Mark. And
Okay.
yeah, you couldn't be more wrong.
Wow. I mean, that's the thing. Like, isn't that the joy of what we do?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
it's risible to my eyes. Wow. And yet you're genuinely saying to me that they have not been able to improve it at all.
No,
in the last
no,
40
it literally
something years.
is the same. Basically, it's the same
Wow.
suction pipes. They still count the aphids. They still go to the same institute. It's all the same. The only difference is that they send you an email now or a text message rather than
Or it's text message on Saturday.
Yeah. Send you a text message.
What a great Saturday morning text message.
They
that
can
is.
email you a PDF as well if you want. Yeah. Apart from that, same thing. It's still going.
Jesus Christ. Okay, brilliant.
Oh, actually, I did look into sugar beets as well. Because I said a little bit. I thought,
Oh yeah.
what's the deal with sugar beets? Because they don't look.
What's the deal with
Yeah, yeah.
beets?
They don't look sweet to me.
No.
They look like turnips.
Yes.
And, I mean, there's a certain amount of sweetness in a turnip, but it's not, you would think that its main product is sugar.
No.
Apparently, it was essentially, because obviously most sugar in the world comes from canes, which are grown in the tropics. But back in Napoleonic times, the import of sugar could be prevented by people like Napoleon blockading ports and things like that. So clever Prussians looked for alternative sugar sources. And there was a man called Franz Karl Ackard from Berlin. And he worked out that the Mangelwurzel, which I think is one of my favourite named plants.
Amazing.
The Mangelwurzel, which I think is where the Wurzels get the name from, possibly.
There has to be, doesn't it?
But yeah, the Mangelwurzel, which is basically incredibly close to the sugar beet in terms of what type of plant it is, he worked out how to extract sugar from it. And the King of Prussia went, this is brilliant because Napoleon's blockaded the port. We can't get sugar imported from the tropics like we normally do. I'll stump up the money. Let's build a Mangelwurzel sugar extraction factory. So that's what they did. And it was a massive success. And ever since then, Europeans have been able to make their own sugar without having to rely on imports. Although, at the time, the English, because we were the main sugar importers, because obviously we had the empire and all that, our sugar importers tried to bribe old Franz Karl Ackard to pretend that you couldn't extract sugar from sugar beets because they were worried about their industry being destroyed. It was noticeable that a number of his factories burnt down over the years. So I don't know whether we were sending people over to sabotage him or what. But these days,
seems likely.
20% of the world's sugar is from beets and 80% is from cane. And Russia are the ones that make the most sugar beet. But I guess because obviously you can grow it in cold climates as opposed to.
Yeah.
I looked into whether you can
Tropics.
can you eat a sugar beet? What does it taste like? I mean, is it sweet? Apparently, Although it's related to the beetroot, it doesn't taste anything like a beetroot. It actually tastes more like a potato sprinkled with sugar. Which sounds
Yum.
Which sounds awful, doesn't it?
It sounds appalling.
But another Dutch connection. You know, they have stroop waffles here.
Stroopwaffel, yeah.
The stroop in stroopwafel is suikerstroop, which is essentially a type of syrup, and that syrup comes from sugar beets, Mark.
No
Yes.
way ahead of us.
So without sugar beets, we wouldn't have stroopwafels, which of course I eat every day.
Of course you do.
But yeah, aphids are still the biggest problem.
Along with your thin bacon.
Yeah. Aphids are still a massive problem with the sugar beet industry, made even worse because they've banned neonicotinoid insect sprays, which were the only ones that could kill aphids. So even these days, a lot of sugar beets get killed by aphids. They have big ones, big problems with them. So the aphid monitoring network is still really important, Mark. Absolutely, key to this industry.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that, Russell. Obviously, chuffed to bits.
During this century, a subtle change has taken place in the cattle we see in the fields. They're becoming increasingly European, but the biggest change is yet to come. This is a shorthorn, until about 30 years ago, common on Irish and British farms. But today, the most popular cow in Ireland, Britain, and indeed on the continent of Europe is this, the Friesian. She came originally from Holland. There are now about 15 million of them in the EEC. She's easily recognizable by her nice black and white coat, and she's a fabulous producer of milk.
A good quality Friesian can produce well over 1,000 gallons of milk a year, and by skillful breeding and careful feeding, yields just keep going on up. 10 years ago, 24 pints a day was the average. Today, it's 40.
So in dairy farming, it's unlikely that any breed will oust the Friesian. But this is by no means the case with beef cattle. This is a Hereford, the traditional producer of beef. Indeed, that nice white face has become the hallmark of good beef for both breeders and buyers alike. We get most of our beef from Herefords.
This is what a good Hereford steak looks like. And as with our Danish pig, tastes are changing. Traditionally, the Hereford steak has a thick chunk of fat around it. But we're not going for fat as much nowadays, and in any case, the housewife resents having to pay more than £1 a pound for a good steak, and then having to cut all this fat off it. The Continentals were never wild about fatty steaks, and they don't really go for the Hereford.
So the farmers, being primarily good businessmen, turned their attention towards producing a beef animal more appealing to continental taste, and they turned to this, the Charolais. She came originally from central France, and she's a veritable meat factory. A Charolais will put on 20% more meat per day than a Hereford, and the meat is very much to popular taste.
This is a Charolais steak, and as you can see, it has far less fat than the Hereford. Though some people say it has a coarser taste than the Hereford, it seems to be the type of meat that we're going to be eating in the future.
But the Charolais' sheer speed of meat production presents a problem. An unborn Charolais calf will put on 0.5 kilogram a day. Consequently, when it's born, it's too big. This leads to calving problems and losses. So the Charolais by itself was not the answer. What the breeders were looking for was an animal with the same rate of meat production after the calf is born. And so they've turned their attention to two other French breeds, the Blonde d'Aquitaine and the Limousin.
This is what they think the new cow will look like. It'll have much finer bones than the Charolais, and it'll also be much longer. It'll be producing smaller calves, so it won't have the same calving problems. And on top of that, it'll be producing more meat, especially along the back here and on the hindquarters.
And as to colour, well, the breeders haven't decided yet, but they hope to produce a synthetic strain with its own unique colour trademark. So, what do you fancy? Plain, speckled, or perhaps even blue?
Favourite steak, Mark? Favourite cut of steak?
I do like ribeye, but I'd probably go with a T-bone.
I was going to say T-bone,
Yeah.
but then I remembered tomahawk. you ever had a tomahawk steak?
Oh, I have. Yes, I have. Yes, yeah.
Pretty exciting, isn't it? Old tomahawk.
Favorite steak accompaniment, side or sauce?
Peppercorn sauce, I'm saying.
Good choice.
Yeah.
I like a marrowbone.
Oh, yeah.
Turbo boost your steak.
I really fancy a steak now.
Do you know what? I bought one yesterday. I cooked it and ate it because I've been doing notes for this. I was gagging for a steak.
They do look nice, don't they? Those ones that Caroline's waving about on camera there.
They don't look bad. I don't know about nice, but they don't look bad. They look aged, I think is the phrase I'd used.
This is quite a brief little segment. I think mainly what's happened is that Raymondo is on a beef research farm, so you might as well give us a bit of last-minute cow tent.
This is also the darkest segment, I think, that we have. I think principally Raymondo is clearly obsessed with stroking cows, and the BBC tethered several of them to a pipe so that he can stroke as many as he wants.
The thing is, the first cow he stroked, when we first see him, the
receptive.
Is it the Hereford? I think it's all short.
That's the first one, yeah.
He's stroking.
Shorthorn.
It's a shorthorn.
Yep. Then the Frisian, then the Hereford, then the...
So the shorthorn is absolutely loving being stroked. Like, looks really relaxed.
Yeah.
It's like got that little sort of like that chin out face that animals do when
Which is really
when they like being stroked. And I think that
more of that, please. I'd like more of that.
That lure. I think that gives Raymond a false idea that all cows want to be stroked, because every other cow that he tries to stroke in this sequence really doesn't want to be stroked. They keep trying to move their head away from his hand, and he's just relentlessly trying to touch their heads. It's a strange one. But he's also wearing leather gloves by the looks of it as well. Which I don't know.
Oh my god, I didn't. Yeah, do you know? I was looking at his leather gloves, thinking like they look like driving gloves. I did not associate the fact that he's literally stroking the cows with what must be the memory of their dead parents on his hands. Yeah,
I don't know how good a cow's sense of smell is, but if they've got a good sense of smell, then those gloves probably reek of death.
Yes, memento mori. This is basically identical to the Danish pig segment we had a few segments ago, but it's one stage before they produce the VI pig.
Yeah.
So they are talking about what they're going to do, but fundamentally it's the same thing. It's like we have these cows, they all do different things. The market changes, farmers need to respond, so they are working on something new, which is fundamentally what they were talking about with the Danish pigs, except that with the Danish pigs, they actually had the final product to show us the results of their labor, but with the cows, they're not there. And I think you're right. I think it's because obviously they're on a cow research program, and the cows are available. So sure, you might as well just show them off. Now, having said all that, they do have something to show us, Russ. Caroline has a standee, and it's a standee of a future cow. It's weirdly, it's kind of in, I was going to say black and white, it isn't. It's in blue and white. So it's a very odd thing. And it was only this time round that when you and I are watching, is that there are times when she strokes this standee and slaps the rump of this standee, and it makes a moo sound.
Do you think like Raymond was like tugging the cow next to him to make it moo on demand in order to?
I think he was. I think he was chastising them for not accepting his strokes, and they were like, moo, "Get me out of here."
Very handsome cows. The thing is, these days we've become so used to the bog standard Frisian cow. We rarely see other cows. I don't think much these days.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, they're all Frisians.
Yeah, so it's nice to see a little.
You might see a Jersey every now and then, but that's about it, really.
Yeah, Frisian cows. Speaking of Frisian cows, I was thinking, well, why are all the cows Frisian cows? It's because they can generate colossal amounts of milk, Mark. They can generate more milk than any other cow. So that's why everyone loves them. And obviously Frisian, and I think probably anybody who remembers our Dutch episode, I pointed out that Friesland is an area of the Netherlands. It's the area of the Netherlands where they speak a different language, which is the closest language to English. And they're the ones who came up with the Frisian cow. Although in America they call it the Holstein.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they don't call it a Frisian cow.
So I've heard of that kind of cow, but I didn't know it was the same thing.
Same breed, same thing as a Frisian.
They've rebadged it.
They
you
have
fool.
indeed rebadged it, you fool. The people of Friesland have been breeding Frisian cows for nearly 2,000 years. And because the Dutch grassland is very good for grazing cows on. Over the years, they produce colossal amounts of butter and cheese. And they think that one of the theories of why the Dutch are so tall is because over the centuries, their diet has been much richer in dairy products than any other nation because of the amount of milk these Frisian cows are pumping out, left, right and centre. So
why not?
The average Frisian cow in Europe will knock out 26,000 litres of milk in its lifetime. Its milk contribution years are only a couple of years. So, yeah, that's a lot. Although in America, they pump them full of hormones, obviously, manufactured by our friends Monsanto.
Of course they do, naturally.
So they pump them full of Monsanto hormones, and their cows average 28,000 litres, although there is one world record milk-producing cow which goes by the name of Burwell Buckeye GG EX943E. Makes it sound like a robot cow. In 2016, in space of 1 year, that cow managed to pump out 34,000 litres of milk.
That's a lot.
That's some sore rudders, isn't it?
Yeah, doesn't sound healthy.
The thing with these cows is that they do this selective breeding thing. So it goes back to the selective breeding, the embryo transfer thing that we were talking about in the second segment, and it's all based around that. So they choose use the eggs and semen from the biggest producers. They keep using those over and over and over again. So the world's full of Frisian cows, but actually they have relatively few parents compared to the number of cows that there are.
They're relatively inbred, is what you're saying.
They're not really inbred because it's more like they've just got very few parents. They're just loads and loads of twins and siblings, but they don't breed with each other. They just have a load of set parents that make all of them. Yeah, so there's one cow that was born in 1965 called Round Oak Rag Apple. I don't know where they get names for these cows. That was a bull, it was a prize bull, and it was named Bull of the Century.
Bull of the Century
by the Holstein International Association in 1999.
Okay.
They reckon that has 5 million descendants.
Wow.
So, yeah. So no wonder all the cows all look the same, Mark. They're
like
the same dad.
The Genghis Khan.
Yeah. Genghis Khan.
Hey!
But what Raymond's talking about here is he's talking about the idea of breeding a new breed that's better, of mixing them. And the French did do this before. So there's one breed that he mentions called the Blonde d'Aquitaine. That was already a mixed breed, but they didn't, in the end, they've not come up with this extra new breed of cow because...
Oh, they haven't? Oh, okay.
They've stuck with existing breeds. It's just that
perfected the ones that exist.
It's just that they've gone back to using breeds that they weren't using back then. So for a long time, everyone was using the Charolais, which is the white one he's got here, the Limousin, which is the another one that looks a bit like a Charolais, and in Britain we were using the Herefords and the Shorthorn. But then suddenly in this century, 2 cows have just completely zoomed to the top and completely overtaken them. And they're cows that have already long existed, but for some reason, everyone likes them anymore. Number 1 is the Belgian Blue, which I've put a picture of at the bottom of this.
Yeah, which is unpleasant.
Which looks like it's been on the absolutely on the roids, isn't it? The Belgian Blue here.
Absolutely, it is. I struggle to describe what it looks like. It's well, look, it'll kill any of us. That much is true. It is pure muscle, but the muscle is defined in such a way as to make it look like it's grown up. It's like it was born, put into a string vest, and then it is expanded around the string.
You know, there's a phrase when people sometimes say, they're so muscly, their muscles have got muscles, don't they? They say, is that a say? That's a say.
Yes, their muscles have muscles. And that's exactly what that's the Belgian Blue.
Yeah, but the thing with this cow is that is literally true. His muscles have muscles because...
So, is this the literal muscles from Brussels?
So, the Belgian Blue has a genetic defect, which means that it suffers from a thing called double muscling. So its muscles do genuinely grow muscles. So, because there's some sort of normally in a mammal there's a hormone that stops your muscles growing once they reach a certain point. This doesn't have it, so it just keeps growing muscle. So obviously perfect for chopping up for meat because it's got twice the amount of muscle that a normal cow would have. So that obviously has zoomed. That's second place in the cattle popularity.
This poor, tragic genetic cul-de-sac with like meat tumors is the number one cow.
No, it's the number two cow. The number one.
Oh, number two. Sorry. Okay.
The number one is, of course, the Aberdeen Angus. The Aberdeen Angus.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Everything's Angus these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
It never used to be Angus, everything. But now it's the only beef that they tell you what beef it is when you order it in, like, I don't know, Burger King or whatever. Burger King doesn't say it's what other beef they have, do they?
It's the Belgian Blue.
No, exactly. But for some reason, everyone loves the word Angus, which is weird because the Angus Steakhouse in London is famously one of the worst restaurants in London.
Absolutely awful. I've been there, Russ.
Have you? Have you eaten it?
Yeah. Because myself and my cousin Shane, we went through this phase for a couple of years. We went to some really nice steak restaurants and like just travel around London, like going to interesting places. We were both like, "Shall we try the Aberdeen Angus Steakhouse?" It's like because it's probably the most iconic and famous steak restaurant in London, not least because like it's in a lot of films because it's right there by Leicester Square. But they're like, oh, what's the worst that can happen? And it was absolutely appalling, and it was so expensive. Like it's basically Hawksmoor prices. For, how does one put this, not the Hawksmoor experience.
No.
Hawksmoor is incredible value for money because you go there and you eat something wonderful that you can't really repeat at home. And it's just such a respectful, fun place. The Aberdeen Angus Steakhouse, it's actually one of those places where you go like, now I understand when people talk about tourist traps, I understand.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I hope they're not owned by Monsanto because we're going to get a huge suite against us of legal...
Always good fun when the bulb goes out in the G of the Aberdeen Angus Steakhouse as well.
Very true, yeah. Have you been? You've not been.
No,
why would anyone go? We went because we thought it would be funny, and it wasn't.
I remember reading an article about it and how there was some investigative journalist trying to find out who owns it and how is it made to exist.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah. And they couldn't find out. Yeah. No one knows because it's prime real estate.
Maybe I'll go there next time. Maybe next time I go to London, maybe I'll go there. Go there for lunch and then go to Garfunkel's for dinner.
I've not been to Garfunkel's. But I'll tell you what, I'll join you there. I'll join you for dinner.
But yeah, the Aberdeen Angus, it's obviously famously a Scottish breed, hence the name. It's been around since the 16th century. But for some reason these days, there's something about, I think because their meat's quite marbled and there's much more of a trend for marbled steaks these days. It's sent them right to the top. And despite being a Scottish breed, they're not too fussed about warm climates. So they'll happily live in America and stuff like that. So they've absolutely zoomed to the top of the popularity charts and are by far the biggest growing cow in the world. But I have to say, I only discovered doing this research that Aberdeen Angus is not the cow that I thought it was. I always thought an Aberdeen Angus was the big furry thing. That's not an Aberdeen Angus. That's a Highland. That's Highland cattle. Yeah. That is not an Aberdeen Angus. I was kind of disappointed by it, really, because I imagined just like huge herds of these big fluffy furry cows wandering around the place. But
Snuffleupagus.
Yeah. But no, it's not the case. And also, you can get a blue cow. Raymond is correct, but they're not blue. They're just grey.
I'd like to circle back to the classic Raymond end at the end. But before we get there, there's a couple of things I want to point out. One, finally, in an episode of the 1970s, we can always assume it'll happen, but it was only right at the end did we get some proper casual sexism. And once again, it was from a lady. Caroline.
They're always the worst sexist, the ladies, I always find.
Well, of course they are. Well, they've had to suffer sexism, so they're going to pull up the ladder behind them, Russ. That's how it works. The housewife resents having to pay anything more than £1 a pound for a good steak and then having to cut all of its fat off, she says, which is immediately followed by Raymond saying the farmers being primarily good businessmen. Obviously, there can be no business women or business people as farmers. And then the other thing, before we get on to the ending, is I think there is the darkest allusion to cruel farmers when they start talking about they breed a particular type of Shalwa who grow calves in utero that put on so much weight that they can't be birthed.
Oh, yeah.
And Raymondo refers to calving problems and losses. Which I think is a very polite way of saying, I think creates really horrible images of calves that can't come out, or worse, calves that burst out. But either way, clearly, one wonders what the numbers are. It almost feels like a generation of Charleroi cow, should we say, never made it onto stage because they were tinkering with this problem whereby they couldn't give birth, and you can't really keep a calf in you. So one or both cows would almost certainly be killed. And I thought that was particularly bleak. Bit of an upsetting image, despite Raymond's attempt to make it feel perfectly normal.
Although, obviously, there's the turducken, isn't there?
Yes.
So you've got kind of like a ready,
now you're on something.
Ready-made.
Okay,
you've got a ready-made beef
yeah,
version of that without having to do any of the butchery yourself. You've got a cow inside a cow already.
Okay, fair enough. And I like I do like marrows, and there's a lot of marrow in 2 cows. I do want to come back to the ending, which is like, so Raymondo says, and as to the colour, well, the breeders haven't decided yet. They hope to produce a synthetic strain with its own unique colour trademark, so what do you fancy? Plain, speckled, or perhaps even blue? And you're right, talk about the fact that the blue might be colour that is in a cow, but I feel that might be more name than actual colour. But it is a classic Raymondo exit, not least because he's off the screen before he's finished his final sentence.
Why does he do that?
Which we have noticed on several occasions. It reminds me of that montage of David Cameron doing his interviews where he'd say goodbye and walk away immediately at the time of his choosing. And Baxter does exactly the same thing. It's quite astonishing.
Maybe early in his career, he stood there and he
RAF
felt
pilot?
uncomfortable because the camera was on him for too long or something like that, and he decided, right, in future, that's never happened to me ever again. I'm going to bugger off immediately. Might have to add it to the audit.
Oh yeah. Baxter walking off mid-sentence. Baxter buggers off. I love it.
Speaking of buggering off,
oh mate, hey, shall we crunch those numbers? Perfect. Let's start with the year in context. Cinema box office, November 1976.
usual issue, not many reliable numbers. I'd got a top 4.
That'll do.
Number 4, Bugsy Malone.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Number 3, At the Earth's Core. It's very similar to Journey to the Centre of the Earth, as you might have realised. But
I think I would have guessed that, yeah.
It's Peter Cushing, Doug McClure, some very shonky dinosaur action.
I immediately feel like I've seen it, yeah.
Number 2, Family Plot. And I thought, what the hell's that?
Is that a horror film about a
It's
cemetery?
Hitchcock's final film.
Oh, wow. Gosh.
Didn't realize knocking out films in 1976, did you?
No, I didn't.
Number 1, absolute classic, Logan's Run.
Oh, wow. Cool. All right. That's pretty cool. We should note that you and I, plus probably most of our listeners, are way beyond the point that we would have gone into. Was it the cycle or the circle or whatever?
That crystal in the middle of my hand is absolutely glowing red hot.
Well, it's good because it's winter. Pop chart?
Number 10, Money, Money, Money by ABBA.
Okay.
Number 9, Lost in France by Bonnie Tyler. You know what I found out recently, which I didn't realise? Simply the Best, Tina Turner song, is actually originally a Bonnie Tyler song. The Tina Turner version came out only a year after Bonnie Tyler's version.
Gosh, no idea.
It's interesting. Love Me by Yvonne Elliman is at number 8. Number 7, Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry. Number 6, Mississippi by Pussycat. Number 5, If Not You by Dr. Hook. Number 4, Somebody to Love by Queen. Number 3, You Make Me Feel Like Dancing by The Old Sailor. Number 2, Under the Moon of Love by Shawaddy Waddy. It's really difficult to say Shawaddy Waddy without doing a Jimmy Savile impression, isn't it? And number 1, If You Leave Me Now by Chicago.
That feels like a really good top 10. I like that. Any prices?
Yes.
The unit cost of a cow?
No, we've got an absolute plethora of prices. Gallon of petrol,
do them all.
77 pence. Bottle of whiskey, £3.75. Pint of beer, 33 pence. 20 figs, 45 pence. Pint of milk, 9p. Colour television, £209.95. Average house price, £12,000. Half a pound of butter from Tesco, 16 pence.
That's interesting. So the average house price is what? Did you say 15,000?
12,000.
12,000, and you can buy a car for 2,500, which we know is 15 grand.
Yep.
Which means that you should be able to buy a house now for 60,000.
£68,000 according to this, yeah.
Okay, carry on. God, that's ridiculous.
Can of Coke, 9.5 pence. Full Cortina, 2026. Golden Wonder Crisps family pack, 19.5 pence. 1 dozen large white eggs, 43 pence. And a tub of margarine from Tesco, 10.5 pence.
Wow, that makes that Dutch butter seem expensive. August Catalogue, Russ, how much is a Russell Hobbs?
It's not.
Go on.
Mark.
No, what?
This, I don't know what the hell this is, Mark. But by far the highest priced kettle this month is the Judge Ironstone automatic kettle. Judge Ironstone. That sounds like...
I've never heard... What? That's made up nonsense. What do you mean?
Well, he sounds like a...
That's like Judge Reinhold's dad.
Yeah, Judge Ironstone.
Yes,
Judge Ironstone. Automatic kettle. It's got decorated enamel, switches off when boiled, 2,750 watts, 3-pint capacity. Recommended retail price, £19.50. Argos price, £14.95.
Magazine covers?
Well, New Scientist. Turns out it happens to be their 20th anniversary issue this month, which means their front cover is just a load of previous New Scientist front covers all lined up together.
Okay, fair enough.
Popular Science, however, has a man driving a very futuristic-looking wind-powered vehicle. Wouldn't look out of place in a modern day. It looks very futuristic. It's called the Hybrid Windmobile. Uses the wind to stretch batteries' energy. And also there's, can we predict the coming California earthquake? I would say no. Scientific American is, once again, one of the most boring-looking front covers I've ever seen. It's just like a circle. And it says, forming of sheet metal. That's the headline.
Brilliant. Wow.
Time magazine, TV Superwomen, Charlie's Angels. A photo of Farrah Fawcett and the other two. Fortean Times. This is a particularly early issue of Fortean Times. Diary of a Mad Planet, Christ's Face, Visions, Nottingham Lion, and Robert Forrest on the Great Pyramid. Private Eye has a politician who looks like he's just fallen asleep with his glasses all Captain Manneringed up on his face. And he's going zzz. And then somebody else in another speech bubble was saying, wake up, Reggie, you've been fired. And I thought,
Brilliant.
Oh, who's Reggie?
Yeah, Reginald who?
So I looked into it. It's Reginald Maudling, who was appointed by Margaret Thatcher as Shadow Foreign Secretary. But then they disagreed about economics, so she sacked him. And his departing words were, I can sum up my career as hired by Winston Churchill, fired by Margaret Thatcher.
I'm sure he thought that was very clever, but actually, with hindsight, it's like, that's quite a top and tail, isn't it?
And then finally, Playboy magazine. It has on the cover Patty Maguire, who is... She's either putting on or taking off her shirt. I can't tell which because it's a still photo. It's still a lot of buttons.
I have to say, it seems more like she's taking it off.
She has. I would say she has a lot of buttons to do up, but not many buttons to undo. That's all. That's the only way I would say.
Wow.
And also in the issue is now the real Jimmy Carter on politics, religion, the press, and sex in an incredible Playboy interview.
Great articles, brilliant stuff. So, most important invention.
The artificial insemination.
Artificial insemination, yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that. Yeah, definitely. Buff uff. It's the one that kind of jumps out. It's like, that really has changed a lot, really. Most worthless invention?
That astronaut outfit Rod's wearing inside the tractor.
Yeah. Okay, 100% correct, yeah. Most inaccurate prediction of the future?
That they would need a new type of cow. They don't need, need a new type of cow. They used an old type of cow instead.
The cows we need are right in front of us the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I like that, yeah. Worst screwed by a presenter. I feel this is Caroline Erskine's to lose just because she ummed and ahed.
Poor old Caroline. She lacked the professionalism that we expect in a Tomorrow's World presenter.
Well, we like to expect in a Tomorrow's World presenter, but we very rarely see. I feel like I don't understand why they didn't say like, oh, it's okay, Caroline, we'll do that again. Not least because there's a cutaway to Rod almost collapsing into... a thresher, which in most episodes would be what would win this, but no, unfortunately, if you and ah, you're gonna run
and
over
also
that category.
Something we didn't mention in that previous segment about Caroline.
I swear we said everything we
no, in that last segment.
Oh yeah, when she comes back again, yeah.
But there's a point in it. Did you notice this where she's speaking and she suddenly realizes mid-sentence that what she's about to say rhymes?
Oh, rhymes,
and she pauses as she's saying it.
You've actually laid it out, haven't you?
What did she say? She says skillful breeding and careful feeding. Like that.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. She doesn't want to rhyme, but she's about to.
I've got to go with it now because I can't think of anything else to say.
Yeah. God bless her, but no, I think they can't. Best attempt at making something boring interesting?
Maybe Rod's explaining the green pound to us?
Do you know what? I think
He did make it sound like the crime of the century.
I think the aphid segment is boring, and actually they do a good job of making
Well,
it
they stick some
interesting.
rock music
How about
in there,
that?
don't they? That made it a bit thrilling.
They
and
do.
nearly
You're
had a heart
absolutely
attack
right. It
when
was
that
like,
came on.
I want to say Rod's thing, except that I found that fucking boring. Which is why I would go with the aphid section. Because I think,
aphids, I'll go with that.
Because you're right, it's the only one with a soundtrack. Best use of music,
Right.
same
Yeah,
section,
same, yeah,
aphid, because it's the only one that uses music. Best or worst use of furniture.
Now, I actually, these days, because I've been burnt before, I now make sure that I, at the end, whiz through the episode,
and look for
look
seats.
for furniture.
Yeah.
In this episode, there's literally the only piece of viable furniture in this is the breakfast table that Raymond
Thank you.
is
That's
sitting
exactly
at.
what I was thinking. Yeah, that's exactly what I was
So
thinking.
it's got to be the breakfast
was-
table that Raymond's sitting at when he broadcasts through the window.
It's the only one I could think of, yes. And most notable clothing, and of course, surely it has to be Spaceman Ross.
Yeah, with his quarto-filled overalls.
His Quarto trapping overalls, yes. Did we see anything in the episode that made it through to the future? And
Astonishing amount of stuff in this episode.
I'm gobsmacked.
It really is wall-to-wall successes. It's kind of the reverse of medical stuff. We see so much medical stuff in this.
Yeah, we do.
And then when I research it, it turns out that they're only imperceptibly closer to reaching the thing that they're talking
all
about.
pipe dreams.
Whereas in this, everything that they said happens in exactly the way that they said it was going to.
Our trope about farming is that they're cruel, and that stands, and this episode does not disabuse us of that, But the flip side is they are ruthlessly efficient.
Yeah, they get things done.
They are getting things done on an industrial scale at every time they come on the episode. So yeah, a huge amount makes it through. And what does this episode tell us about the 25th of November 1976? Europe's a good thing.
Europe is brilliant.
And there's nothing they can do about it.
And animals are delicious.
Animals are a yumtacular. Yeah. I think that's fair. And don't worry your pretty head about, whether they feel anything or not, because they don't. Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And I will go back to what I said at the beginning, which at this point now feels like about 7 hours ago.
It literally was.
It's close to. I'm not far off with my exaggeration. I genuinely worried when you said you had found an episode from Ireland from the 1970s, and as a result, I was really struck by how respectful and interesting the program was. Because again, like an entire episode about farming is not something that I would naturally find interesting, but it genuinely is. It's because I think the show respects the group of people they're dealing with, almost to a fault. Okay. TW tropes. Presenter having to speak over louder sounds. Well, I think we can agree that definitely happens.
The extra dash of irony that she's in a quiet
cab. Yeah. Well, one wonders what it would have been like if she was not. Does Caroline Erskine wear sleeves that don't match her body? I don't.
The only thing I would say
is
is that vet wears a sleeve that doesn't match his body because he's got his hand up a cow's arse.
I'll think about that one. Something to do with oil rigs? Unfortunately not. Viciously, obviously, brand name of the BBC. On the ad-free BBC, I think there is. There's both Massey Ferguson, there's Ford.
We discount vehicles, don't we? That's the problem.
So I don't think we can have that one here. Clear and blatant lying. It feels almost scrupulously honest, except at the bit where they lied to Michael Rodd about the spaceman outfit being the future. Casual sexism. Yep.
Absolutely.
Were there any Dutch angles? No, there were no
only
Dutch
the butter.
angles. Oh, yes, true. Nothing was presented from a gantry.
No, only a fence. I like to present it from a fence. That's not the same thing.
Oh, that's true. And through a window. Episode ends in a damn squib? Nope. Woollard and McCann abroad? Unfortunately not. Even though Woollard can't stop talking about the abroad, and he wants us to know he himself has been abroad. He is most certainly
he's technically abroad from islands.
Very true. I would argue, though, everyone else is abroad, except for William Woollard, though.
The old rare reverse Woollard.
the classic reverse Woollard, obviously. Lasers, magnets, boats, nothing. Wow, this actually might be the lowest. I've only took twice,
Bloody
Russ.
hell. Well, I suppose it is a special, unusual episode. That's the thing. So
it is. You're right. But the thing is, like,
hang on. Why didn't you tick evil farmers?
Oh, I did. Sorry, yeah. Do you know, I didn't even talk about that because I suppose that I assumed it was so dead cert. I actually didn't even ask whether we needed to tick that. All right, there we go. Oh, the only thing left to say from my perspective is that it genuinely breaks my heart to say that we only have 1,381 episodes left to discuss, Russ.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
God.
Forgive me, I hate to be the bear, but what a shit way of ending the
I'm
episode.
well enough.
I wanted to end on a high, and yet I've just brought this. Oh, anyway.
Oh, well.
What about you? Anything else?
I think...
You think we might have said enough?
I think we may be talking long enough, Mark.
So we are done. Brilliant.
Well, Mark, I'm afraid after all that, I'm going to have to leave you now. I don't know about you, but the temperature's really dropped over here in the Netherlands. And I'm going to have to go over and switch on my central heating because currently it's absolutely freezing in here.
Hey, and what I find not funny about that joke is that, Russ, I only know you only turn the heating on when I come over for it. So I know you're lying. That's tremendous. Well done.
But yes, sorry it's such a long one this month, everyone. Turns out that me and Mark are much more interested in farms than we realised. What we're going to do next month? Easter?
Actually, an Easter one's not bad. I wonder if there are Easter
Might be something
things.
egg-based, won't there? Easter-based or chicken-based or
An egg special.
rabbit-based. Well, you at home will have to wait another month to find out. But until then, if you are on the internet, we will see you tomorrow.
Bye.